The massive leaves were rough to touch, making us have to carefully climb through the thick forest cover, avoiding the spikes that sporadically laden the overgrown vegetation. My senses relayed to me the near-identical similarities between these leaves and the ones I was familiar with. These were far larger, dwarfing even the tall sun manipulator in length. Their thick density came from a nutrient-rich paste inside of them, each one packed with what my senses knew to be water, proteins, and other substances that could be found in dishes of yam and fish. The moon's hue had since been blocked out by the tree covering, making us rely solely on our sensing abilities. There were many factors happening concurrently with our situation. My training had prepared me for awareness of such things. We were in danger. The buzzing of the faceless mantis creatures could be heard overhead through the jungle cover. What's more, other variants of the insects, different from all that I had encountered thus far, dwelled on the forest floor beneath the branches we were situated on. I was unaware of the full extent of the abilities of the manipulators with me. We were all relying on our earth-sensing abilities, our chi pressed among the branches, commanding the overgrown mushroom-shaped plant to relay the things unseen. The earth spoke in great detail. The immensity of my surroundings became immediately apparent as I knelt, a palm extended onto the branch. I came to learn that all of the mushroom-shaped trees seemed to be parts of the same whole. Each one, from the smallest to largest, contained distinct roots that intertwined to give the trees their shape. The source of these roots came from a source deep beneath the earth, beyond where I could sense. "We are in danger here," the stocky earth manipulator said in Itri, the language of Adịmians from the north, the very same language my name is from. The gravity of this peculiar situation likely surprised him back into his native tongue. Below us, there were different variants of the insects, these ones appearing ant-like, having hair, mandibles, antennae, and the body structure of an ant. Only, they were overgrown, too many limbs and eyes to truly be considered ants. Their exoskeleton did not seem as thick as the faceless variants, but they were faster moving and comparable to the faceless variants in length. The danger mentioned by the earth manipulator came deep within their vibrations. There were many that had been scattered about nearby, but the longer we stayed in the tree, our chi pressed along its branches, the more they seemed to take notice of us and started to converge on our location, each one carrying a uniform vibration, one of hunger. They panted heavily through the small holes in their exoskeleton, their spindle, hairy legs thudding along the jungle floor with haste, with antennae quickly twitching, desperately searching for us with voracious intent. Fear emanated from all of us. Where were we to go? The buzzing in the distance grew louder until they were upon us. The faceless variants that had been searching for us since we eluded them broke the dense cover of the tree, spewing the liquid contained within the leaves as we scrambled away. Our scramble happened so abruptly, I had not noticed the ant variants had also made their way up the tree's branches. The two different variants began clashing with each other as we fled, slashing and beheading each other in their animalistic clash in hopes of securing us as their food source, stinging and dismembering each other without remorse or pattern. We maneuvered through the warring giant insects, rushing forward, uncertain if we could outrun these relentless things, but we had to put as much distance as possible between us and them while they were engaged in battle amongst themselves. Luckily, the trees on the insect homeland were easy to traverse. There were so many of the overgrown renditions of the strange vegetation in close proximity, neither of us had to make use of any other element other than earth. Utilizing the strong, static vibrations of the tree as an anchor to attach our chi to, using the momentum of the pull as a sling, giving us the ability of flight. The technique was a common one to use when traversing the jungles back home. Only here, it was much more uncomplicated, as the immensity of the trees made them easier to attach to and gave a greater distance of travel while slinging. The trees themselves were strange. Bark was not the only material it seemed to be infused with. The main source material that comprised the entirety of everything I could sense was fungus. A fungus unlike anything I had come to know. Being so malleable, it was hardly detectable in some forms. The leaves of the trees were by far the most peculiar form of this fungus, rich in nutrients that made my jaws salivate and my stomach rumble, but still containing trace amounts of the fungus. We would stop periodically when sensing more of the ant variants lurking on the forest floor. The concentration of the fungus that composed everything in the jungle became more concentrated and less malleable the closer to its source, I sensed. Even on the forest floor, where the ants lurked, there was less variability in the fungus, which made me grow weary of consuming the lush and nutrient leaves that surrounded us as we hid within the jungle's bushes, waiting for the insects to pass. Hunger from a full day's battle in the periphery. There seemed to be thick forest cover in the distance since escaping the battle and slinging along. A relatively small population of ant variants, smaller in size to the others we encountered, occupying it, a place to hide and potentially rest. We came upon the last clearing that led to the tree we sought. It was large for us, but the smallest in proximity to those around it. Even the ants that dwelled throughout were smaller than the first group we encountered, yet they were still much larger than us. I had never been witness to such an immensity of nature in the Adịmian jungle. The tree would be impossible for the massive faceless variants to breach. Their clunky bodies would not be suited for the tree's stumpy branches, which contained a tuft of thick leaves that blocked the moon's bright hue. It was the perfect refuge for us. We had to take it from the small ants that occupied it. They paused in unison, stopping their milling when we used our senses on them, as if they could detect us, and mobilized shortly after. A large concentration of them formed up at the base of the tree in our direction. A few broke from that formation and slowly started marching toward us with their antennae fluttering. A ferocious wave of anger crashed about in the creatures, my water senses strangely detecting the emotion. "They are in a formation," I said, glancing over at the others that aided me. The tall man with the facial scarrings pointed over to where the ants were formed up and said something in his native tongue, to which the earth manipulator nodded, responding in the same tongue. "We need to plan," the earth manipulator said to me. I knelt down and pointed a finger toward the dirt. "Since we can manipulate the sun." I began explaining, pointing at the tall sun manipulator, while etching a rough sketch of the battlefield with my fire-tipped finger. "We will provide suppressing fire from cover," I explained, etching the plan into the tree bark. The earth manipulator ensured the tall man could understand. "And you will sneak past their flank and engage them from behind," I said to the earth manipulator. "We will break cover and destroy their line, and can advance or regroup depending on their capabilities." It had been a chaotic scramble for survival until now, but we could finally plan. We could finally win. "My name is Amadi," the earth manipulator said. I told him my name. A small smile came across his face when he recognized the name's meaning. "We are brothers," he said in Ikri. I nodded tentatively, not having the time or desire to explain my past. "And him?" I asked Amadi, gesturing toward the tall Easterner. "We need to move quickly," Amadi said after a brief hesitation, nodding at the Easterner before taking point. Curiosity of the pair took hold of me when Amadi had avoided my question. They knew each other, but mistrusted me. I recalled Amadi's words to me before we escaped the cave. The Easterner knew somehow that I was a guardian. I was bothered by this as I took point, the ants slowly approaching. How had my cover been blown? I was still quite unsure of what was occurring, but such things were not of immediate concern. Myself and the Easterner shot balls of flame toward the giant ants. The flames rained down on them like droplets, halting their steady advance, allowing Amadi to rush past their flank. We fired in bursts when they tried to intercept him, our flames stopping them from reaching the quick earth manipulator. The exoskeleton of the giant ants was not as resistant to flame as the faceless variants. They would start to spew a foam from their mouths that covered their entire bodies once their exoskeleton started cracking from the flames. The foam held them in place, preventing the advanced line from intercepting Amadi. The sun manipulator formed a hand sign while breaking cover. I almost shouted at him for not following the plan, but sensed a peculiar vibration coming from the stuck ants. The air above them hung in a thick, near-liquid state, the source of the change coming from the sun manipulator's hand sign. He was not merely a sun manipulator. The hand sign he used was unknown to me, but it was indeed the source of the thick air that engulfed the ants. A type of gas, a wind manipulation technique. I called upon the energy of the sun within me to ignite the ants, incinerating the advanced line before they could mobilize. We shot another round of flames at the back line as they looked to engage Amadi, spewing their foam to put the fire out, kept them stuck in place. The tall Easterner made the hand sign again, and we ignited them, easily decimating the large concentration of them that galvanized at the base of the tree. The leaves above us started to ruffle. I sensed many of their hairy, spindle legs rushing toward us with tremendous speed. A singular vibration of vengeance radiated from all of them along the branches. We would not be able to incinerate them in the same manner. Doing so would destroy the tree we sought as refuge. I quickly jumped atop one of the downed insects, deteriorating part of the exoskeleton on its thorax that was not burned too badly, reforming it into a shield. "Arm yourselves," I said, taking a defensive position atop the ant. Amadi and the Easterner did the same, breaking unburned parts of the exoskeleton with deterioration and reforming it to suit their defensive needs. Like floodwaters, the ants descended upon us. I levitated, using the sun's radiance to inundate myself with its energy, crashing into the middle of their swarm, scattering their numbers. They were a predictable foe, charging forward mindlessly like the angered, hungry beasts they were. Each time one would charge forward, I would break its exoskeleton with deterioration and use sun manipulation to deliver a fatal blow. I hardly had use for the shield I created. Eventually, I reformed it into a spear I would inundate with electrical charges and used it as my weapon of choice when killing the giant creatures. The insects' numbers should have been overwhelming, but they did not yield Tambura's gifts as we did. The battle was swiftly over with the three of us being victorious. The ambience of the jungle returned after the last insect was slaughtered. Even nature's call was different on this strange land. All of the sounds we heard in the distance came from insects, buzzing of wings, deep, chest-vibrating croaks and chirps, comparable to that of crickets. "We will rest for the night," Amadi said, his entire body stained with the thick purple blood of the insects. "Indeed," I agreed, my eyes fixed on the leaves. My body begged for the nutrients they contained, but I hesitated, not wanting the strange fungus that consumed the vibrations of everything around me to enter my body, remembering Sorochi's warning when I consumed a feast while in the insect's mind. Granted, I was no longer in their mental entrapment, but I recognized similar emotions of reluctance coming from the Easterner, who recoiled into a stare filled with angered vibrations upon noticing me. "Arimonu," I said, patting my chest, repeating my name to the tall man who had the strange scarifications on both cheeks. The anger within him swelled. "Guardian!" He snarled in Lenga with clenched jaws. I stopped in my tracks. Of course, he would have surmised what I was by now. Just as I was assessing both of them, they were surely doing the same. I know not how he was able to guess what I was just from my abilities. But he was accurate, which meant I was likely correct in my earlier assessment of him, through his abilities. "Assassin," I said, pointing at him. There was a slight feeling of both amusement and embarrassment radiating off of him. My words had brought a slight curl to the corner of his mouth. He shook his amusement with a huff, his angry vibrations returning as he turned his back to me to carefully remove a leaf above him. I said nothing, and watched on as he consumed its nutrients, relief and pleasure radiating from him in abundance as he spoke in his language, sounding as if he were chanting, likely giving thanks for his meal in his curious tongue. I watched on with Amadi as the Easterner ate. But even the stocky earth manipulator would eventually succumb to his hunger, despite carrying the same hesitancy as I did. Breaking off his own leaf, slicing it to consume the sweet-smelling nectar within. I would not consume the plant, despite my body begging me to do so. The fungus that comprised everything in this forest seemed to sprout out of the land, growing and multiplying like a cancer. It was like an infection, unnatural, just like the insects that dwelled within its jungle. I could not bring myself to consume the leaves. "You speak Ishri, but you are not from the north," Amadi said, slurping on the leaves' nectar. I am from Inchizonga, a small enclave in Nakaru." "Nakaru?" he said with intrigue, a brow raising. "Yes," I replied. "I would not have taken you to be from that region. You look like a northerner." A common misconception many northerners make when talking to me. I smiled. "How did you get your name?" "It was given to me by my battle master." "Battle master," Amadi lingered. "You are a guardian," he said. His tone sounded deflated. "Aye." I hesitated. Amadi let out a very quiet grunt and did not say anything else for a long while, continuing to eat in silence. "I am a trader from the north. I journeyed far into the east to sell and buy goods from the Brethren of Echo." Amadi's vibrations slowly descended into the same frustration the Easterner housed. "Your king, who is descended from a bloodline in the north, sows the seeds of mistrust and destruction amongst our brethren, not just in the east, but throughout the entire land you call Adim." I wanted to talk more to him, I wanted to know him, but there was resentment and anger deep within his chi. He did not wish to be my friend. The so-called civilization the Adịmian spread is nothing more than an insatiable need for control and dominance. Such things cannot last. He said no more and continued eating. Reluctantly, I welcomed the silence. The wear of the day's battle overshadowed my hunger. Some time after Amadi and the Easterner fell asleep, my eyes and body became heavy. Chapter 11. A loud buzzing woke me from my slumber. I scrambled to try to get to my feet, but my wrist was held by the Easterner, who put a finger to his mouth, silently telling me to keep quiet and remain calm. The horribly intrusive noise had a different tone from the buzzing I had become accustomed to, being more deep and carrying a stronger echo. There was only one very large insect approaching from what I could sense, much different from the other variants we had encountered so far. The full scope of the insect became clearer when it landed. It had brownish fur, 3 legs on either side of its massive circular body that would dwarf the faceless variants, and a long, thin snout that was nearly as long as the ant variants in length. It was too large to fit under the base of the tree, and instead used the antenna attached to its snout to feel around the dead ant variants at the base. Inside its snout was a needle that it would occasionally insert into the dead ants. What was most noticeable about the creature, however, was its giant compound eyes that contained hundreds of retinas. It was very much an insect, its one-dimensional vibrations of curiosity for the slain ants it was assessing and disregard for the rest of its surroundings suggesting as such. Its snout, which looked more like a beak, the brownish fur atop its exoskeleton, and its large beaming eyes, gave the insect a more bird-like appearance. It continued scanning the bottom of the tree. The antenna attached to its snout aided in its assessment of the pile of slain ants, before turning its attention to the top portion of the tree we were housed in. Like a bird, it tilted its head toward our tree as it stepped back. It was not possible to know for sure because we had the leaves providing us cover, but its endless rows of eyes seemed as if they were fixed on the branch we were resting on. None of us moved. What were we to do next? Had it spotted us? Why was it waiting? Without fully extending its wings, it released 3 rhythmic buzzes in succession before returning completely still. I glanced over at both Amadi and the Easterner. Both were just as confused as we laid there observing the giant, bird-like insect. After a long while, more buzzing could be heard approaching. This time the sound made by the insect's wings was a familiar one. Faceless variants were approaching. We scrambled to different parts of the tree. Amadi took the lower level while I remained in the center, and the Easterner took the top branches. When the faceless variants descended from the sky, they did not attack us, but rather encircled the tree, hovering behind the bird variant that was still locked onto us. It moved its wings in another rhythmic pattern, very similar to a drum. My senses detected movement shortly after. Many ant variants traveling fast from a far distance approached the tree we were held up in. "They are coordinating an attack," I shouted to Amadi. "Their numbers are too great," he said. He was right. We had been triumphant last night, only because we had taken the ants by surprise and their numbers were considerably lower than what was approaching. We had to abandon the tree. "Regroup," I said, passing the message along the tree bark to Amadi. We moved to the upper level with the Easterner. "We must leave," I told him, motioning for us to flee. He nodded, understanding the haste and desperation in my tone. With that, we broke cover, immediately bombarded by the faceless variants as they swiped and prodded at us for the brief moment we broke from the tree's protection. This environment was suited for them. Despite their large, burly bodies, the passageways between the trees were wide enough for many of them to hover through. We stood atop the branch of a nearby tree we landed on. It appeared as though the faceless variants had us surrounded on both sides. Breaking cover would see all, if not then, at least one of us swarmed and stung by the creatures. The ants were also rapidly approaching. We had to flee again. The bombardment of stingers and sharp appendages was instantaneous, making it impossible to see the next target. Instead, I traversed around the insect's thick exoskeleton as if I were using the earth flight technique, anchoring myself onto the static silicate vibrations of their natural armor to avoid their strikes, using their vibrations as a sling to propel my body forward. I noticed the flight pattern of the faceless variants would alter every time I anchored myself onto them. When I was clear of the majority of them, I anchored onto one and used a nearby tree to sling myself along, taking the insect with me. I deteriorated its wings to quell resistance from the beast as I came crashing through the tree's thick covering. I immediately detached its stinger before delivering the fatal blow with an electrical bolt. Amadi and the Easterner followed shortly after. "Cover the hole. I shall fashion armor," I said to Amadi. Deteriorating the insect's exoskeleton from its body, I came to learn about some of its anatomy. What I once thought was its head was actually more of a mouth, which contained countless needle-like daggers, weapons. From the natural armor on its mouth, I was able to fashion a protective layer that covered most of my body. From its teeth, I was able to form daggers. I then deteriorated more of its exoskeleton located around its thorax, sensing how this creature's brain, stomach, and reproductive organs seemed to be intertwined. I ignored my curiosity, sensing the ants approaching, and deteriorated enough of the insect's exoskeleton for Amadi and the Easterner to both protect and arm themselves. There was only but a mere moment for them to fashion armor and weapons for themselves before the ants were below us. The creatures moved with such speed, they were already swarming us on our branch before I could accurately gauge their numbers. We formed up with our backs to one another. Being in such a formation allowed us to combine our abilities. Myself and the Easterner used the sun's radiance to project a protective layer of the sun's energy over us. This barrier repelled the ants' giant mandibles and pushed them back. Amadi would use deterioration on them as we pushed on, maiming the relentless creatures. We were able to slowly make our way up the tree while repelling their attacks. There was smoke accompanied by a sizzling sound when mist sprayed past our protective sun layer. "Remove your armor," I shouted, noticing the acid was slowly eating away at my exoskeleton armor. Having to remove the protection required us to stop forming the beam which quelled the insects, immediately making us have to break formation and engage the ants individually. It was as if we were back in the cave battling the faceless variants again. I would have to use the sun's protection by myself when I could, and call upon the earth's guidance to help me evade where I could in another chaotic scramble. I used deterioration on them when the opportunity presented itself, allowing me to escape from the immobilized fiendish things. I used the vibrations of the tree to allow me to levitate over the battle, needing to see the trajectory of those who accompanied me. The two had formed up again, backs facing, slowly heading to where I was. I looked to provide support, raining fire upon the ants in an attempt to allow my allies to travel faster. Some of the ants turned and tilted their heads. A familiar rhythmic buzzing could be heard, its source coming from outside the thick cover of the tree. Liquid began spewing from the insects' mouths. I landed back onto the branch, being sure to avoid being touched by the acid as it completely dissolved the cover of the tree where I was levitating. I caught a glimpse of brownish fur hovering toward the hole made in the tree's leaves as I landed and rushed toward Amadi and the Easterner. There were 3 rhythmic hums from the bird variant's wings as it hovered in place with its loud buzzing, peering into the tree with its endless gaze. "Use their bodies as armor," I cried, deteriorating an ant near me and reforming its protective layer around my skin, ensuring nothing was left uncovered. Amadi and the sun manipulator did the same. The insect's acid rained down on us, but their exoskeleton kept our skin from blistering and melting. We formed up again, our backs facing one another once more, and employed the sun shield, quelling the ants as Amadi maimed them. Their numbers had been considerably decimated, allowing us to move with more speed to the top branch and take to the trees once again. We had some respite for a while. The trees of the part of the jungle we found ourselves in were too close together for the faceless variants to surround us. Instead, we heard the deep and constant buzzing of the bird variant's wings. It hovered above the trees, following us, watching us. We could not seem to escape its watchful eye. I could not sense any ant variants pursuing us, nor could I sense any faceless variants. But the bird continued to shadow our movement. We stopped on a branch when sensing what came ahead. The thick cover of the jungle was coming to an end, making way for a rocky canyon. We stood in silence, the hum of the bird variant's wings still present, but very much in the background. Tambura only knows what awaits us in that canyon, I whispered under my breath. There were more rhythmic hums coming from the bird after Amadi chuckled at my words. Movement along the forest floor invoked haste in us. More ant variants were converging on our location. We quickly broke cover and descended down the mountain that led to the canyon. Far off in the distance, on the other side of the canyon, I observed something that looked like smoke. A human-made smoke, barely visible with the naked eye. The earth helping decipher the small speck I was looking at in the distance. There was a structure over there, smaller than anything the insects could fashion, perhaps a human-made camp. There was a long, rhythmic hum from the bird variant as it watched us descend. Much to my relief, it hovered away, back toward the jungle. Chapter 12. The humidity of the insect homeland was more noticeable as we situated ourselves in the canyon, unlike the dry heat back home. The air here was moist, quickly sucking away any free air I could use to breathe. I lamented not trying to connect more with water. Being a warrior and then a constructor within the Guardian's ranks, there was a greater need for my earth and sun manipulating abilities. I only had a basic comprehension of water and was not able to use the ability for anything more than sensing and basic physical manipulation with the use of hand signs. This strange rocky plain only seemed to amplify such humidity, the sun's powerful rays reflecting off the grainy white rocks that littered the flat canyon. The Easterner said something in his tongue and pointed. Over the horizon, there looked to be a faint smoke emanating from a small stony structure. "A camp," Amadi sighed graciously. "We are not alone after all. There are others who fight," he added, joy radiating from him as he smiled. I had not noticed the cuts and burns on his face until now, his cheeks carrying the brunt of the wear from today's battles. "We must join them," I said, starting to move forward. "Joyous!" The Easterner levitated, but had to use a fire whip technique on something that converged on him. It happened quicker than the blink of an eye. The Easterner quickly landed, as all of us stood in place, weapons drawn, senses keen. But there was nothing that could be sensed. We stared at each other with vibrations that were uncertain and fearful. Let us conserve energy until we are close. I do not know what that creature was. I do not intend on finding out. I said to Amadi, who then told the Easterner in his language to avoid using his sun flight for now. The afternoon sun that bore down on us when starting this trek had since receded into the evening sun's later phases, giving us respite from the wet humidity that covered this cursed land. The canyon did not seem as vast when descending into it. Whatever it was that attacked the Easterner had not returned. We trekked on. Our chi retracted so as to not be detected. The idea of utilizing sunflight started to become more reasonable with each passing moment. A single droplet landed atop my armor. I stopped, asking the earth to relay any abnormalities to me. Nothing. I continued on, seeing that the liquid was indeed rain and not acid as it fell from the sky onto the rocks. The gentle rainfall provided a cool relief to all of us. The armor we had hastily fashioned out of the ant's exoskeleton did not have the same insulation as Guardian armor, so the cool air was welcomed. We continued on in the rain for a long while, climbing, walking, and hopping over the rocks and boulders of the canyon. As I stood at a rock, waiting for the Easterner to climb, I witnessed flesh extending from a nearby rock toward his leg. I quickly lacerated it with a fire blade. The severed flesh squealed and squirmed as if it were in pain before shriveling and becoming void of any vibrations. We all stood there, staring at the strange thing. It was slimy and ringed, looking like a worm of some kind. If not for the pained vibrations it released before its death, I would have not been able to sense it. Be vigilant, I said, observing my surroundings. I had not sensed any movement before climbing the rock. I stood atop the boulder and observed. The far end of the canyon was no longer visible from where we were, and I did not see any strange-looking flesh stretching from any rocks nearby. Just as I was about to climb down, there was a burst of vibration approaching my head. I quickly ducked, which made me slip off the wet rock, landing on my back. I heard the Easterner snarl what sounded like an insult as he let off bursts from his fists. "What was that?" Amadi asked, his eyes wide and rapidly shifting as he firmly held the handle of his blade with both hands. I quickly made my way to my feet, my daggers drawn, electrical charges running throughout my body. I turned to see flesh reaching toward me from a nearby boulder. I slashed at the flesh, but it quickly dodged my strike and retracted back underneath the boulder which it came. We formed up again with our backs to each other. I used earth sense on the boulder the strange flesh retracted into. Nothing could be sensed but the static vibrations of the rock. We circled the area. There was nothing but the static vibrations of rocks around us and the patter of rain. "Let's move quickly," I said. We came upon another large boulder as the sun started to set. The rain continued to pour down, which, by now, made my jaws start to chatter in the poorly insulated armor fashioned from the insect's exoskeleton. It was hard to gauge just how much longer we would be able to traverse the rocky plain under such conditions. The boulder that we had to climb over was quite high, making me think of the mysterious flying creature that attacked earlier. The Easterner started levitating toward the top of the boulder. Amadi and I protested this initially, but I held my tongue, seeing as though he would not heed our warning. At least I could try to sense what it was that attacked if it returned. A burst of vibrations rippled through the air, just as the Easterner was about to reach the top of the boulder. I slowed my breathing, focusing on the area where I predicted the vibrations would travel, near the sun manipulator's head. And just as I sensed it, I used deterioration. There was an abrupt reddish splatter that stained the Easterner's face and armor. Underneath his feet, a small, contorted, and disfigured pile of entrails and exoskeleton. It was certainly the smallest variant of the insects I had seen thus far. It was hard to judge because most of its body had deteriorated. Its exoskeleton was identical in texture and color to the rocks that littered the plains. The remaining wings on its body twitched involuntarily, Amadi climbed the boulder afterward, turning back toward the direction the nearly undetectable insect flew from. "We need to move, now." His voice wavered. I joined him on the boulder, using sunflight. There was movement on the rocks behind us, a lot of it. There were hundreds of them, a whole colony perhaps. They were smaller than the other variants, roughly the size of a bush dog, and even had an appearance similar to a canine from what I could see. Only instead of walking on 4 limbs as dogs did, these creatures walked on 6. The most peculiar of all the variants, they did not rush at us like the ants did. These creatures were slow-moving, walking in a manner that made them look as if they were dancing. Their slow saunter seemed to mask their vibrations, making them invisible to our earth senses. The back of one of the creatures closest to me opened as it brandished sets of wings and started to hover quietly. I shot a ball of fire at it, but it evaded the blast with its blinding speed. I briefly lost track of the creature before sensing it right in front of me. I commanded its rocky carapace to deteriorate, severing the creature in half as its blood and innards spilled onto my face. More of them started hovering. "Form up," I said, shooting back down into the canyon. We all backed into each other while I erected the sun shield with the Easterner. There was a loud crash as one of the creatures smashed into the beam with its blinding speed. The barrier severed it as it caught fire. Its exoskeleton was not as strong as the ant variants, which was a relief. The barrier soon fell under heavy bombardment. The insects, if they were indeed insects, seemed to throw themselves at our sun shield with reckless abandonment, no fear, or perhaps awareness, of the dangers our protective layer was to them. It was over just as quickly as it had begun. The creatures lay lifeless in a disjointed pile of carapace, blood, and entrails, as we moved on in silence, maintaining our formation as night fell. I used earth sense within the protection, no longer seeing the need to mask my chi. The sun's light had made way for darkness, making it impossible to see without the ability. We came to a stop, sensing the dog-like insects ahead of us, milling about. The earth relayed to me their appearance. They looked more like sea-dwelling crustaceans than earth-dwelling insects. I did not sense any eyes on the creatures, but rather a tuft of independently moving tendrils that ran down the spines of their grainy carapace, which blended with the rocks. The creature nearest to us sharply turned, as if it could detect our chi, releasing a hideous hiss comparable to an aggravated feline. The other creatures around it turned and hissed as well. There were many, less than what we had encountered before forming up, but these ones were not stalking us, just seemingly aggravated and territorial. The creature released a peculiar sound right before it lunged. It was as if it were a battle cry, violent and harsh sounding, but sounding almost like a laugh, strangely enough. The first 2 slammed into the barrier and were instantly slaughtered. After a brief delay, the remainder swarmed, slamming into the barrier one after the other, sometimes all at once. Myself and the Easterner ensured the fortitude of the sun shield, the sun's energy still strong within him, but waning within me as my stomach rumbled. Even the humid sun during the day was not enough to sustain me in the absence of food. But just as abruptly as the attack began, there was silence shortly after all the strange crustacean creatures had slaughtered themselves on our sun barrier, leaving only the gentle patter of the night's rain. We continued this way for some time, walking a few meters, getting detected, and then subsequently swarmed by the crustaceans. Each time their malicious hisses and peculiar battle cry brought a chill to my spine. The creatures had become even more plentiful in the canyon as night fell. Each moment passing between the creatures crashing into our barrier and encountering a new group that blindly charged, meeting the same fate as the previous ones grew closer together. The attacks became so frequent, the muscles in my arms started begging for oxygen. The technique that was otherwise simple to use, requiring very little of the sun's energy, started to feel just as taxing on my nervous system as sunflight. We continued on, allowing the creatures to throw themselves at our barrier. Each barrage weakened me as my arms shook, outstretched, maintaining the veil of heat that kept us safe from the crustacean variants. To my relief, encounters with the crustacean variants became less frequent the further we went on. The rain continued, but our shield melted the droplets before they could reach us. When the attack stopped for a long while, we stopped as we did throughout the day to urinate. Amadi went first. We kept the beam above us just in case. My arms continued to shake from fatigue and hunger. I could sense the Easterner's angry gaze, but ignored him. I was still able to continue for as long as needed, or at least until we reached the end of the canyon. The Easterner whispered something, his eyes wide. I looked at him as he unsheathed his daggers and lunged toward Amadi. Before I could react, he was in a struggle with an elongated piece of flesh coming from the bottom of one of the rocks, releasing static charges as he held it within the grasp of his daggers. The flesh retracted when he let go of it, but followed it to the boulder it retreated under. The boulder smashed into thousands of pieces when we collectively deteriorated it, revealing a hole in the earth. The Easterner turned to Amadi and started talking. Amadi seemed as if he were trying to calm the Easterner as the two conversed in what sounded like tense tones. He says there is a monster dwelling underneath the rock, beneath the canyon itself. How was I to answer Amadi? It seemed a ridiculous claim indeed, as my earth senses had not relayed such findings to me. But they also were unable to sense the crustaceans when they stalked us. "Form up!" I abruptly blurted, wanting to ask the Easterner how he came to discern his findings, but there were crustacean variants sauntering their way out of the hole where the boulder was. One of the creatures smashed into the Easterner before he could turn around, his armor luckily taking the brunt of the creature's sharp, piercing snout. I deteriorated the creature before it could deliver a fatal blow with the sharp spines in its elongated jaws. The Easterner quickly stood up and aided Amadi, who encased himself with reformed rocks, the crustaceans releasing their battle cry each time they smashed into Amadi's shield. The Easterner and I dealt with them swiftly. Their blood rained down on us after deteriorating them. "Quickly, Amadi, there will be more," I said hurriedly. Amadi came out of his enclosure, and we quickly formed up, erecting the sun shield. Sure enough, our protection was bombarded. Chapter 13. The escarpment of the far end of the canyon was near. My senses picked up on the mountain ahead. The rain had stopped some time ago. The wet humidity from earlier returned. There was only one more flat plain to cross until we reached the other side. A collective relief radiated from all of us as we headed toward the escarpment. We will have to climb. I do not wish to encounter any more of those wretched crustacean dogs, Amadi said. I chuckled inwardly at the name he had chosen for the crustacean variants. It was an accurate name for those things. They were a wonder, completely blind and heavy, yet so keen on certain types of movement, and fast, as if they had elemental manipulation abilities that enabled such things. I questioned if simply climbing out of the canyon would be enough to escape their relentless attacks, if we had not wiped them out completely already. We stopped walking after a while, sensing something strange underneath our feet. The ground near the escarpment was not rocky and solid, as it had been all this while, but rather was soft soil, only that some parts were more solid than others. The softer parts of the soil seemed as if they could easily collapse if stepped on, the harder parts serving as a narrow path for us to follow, an insect trap. "Stay on the path," I said, continuing forward. A cough that had been periodically annoying me since the rain started returned. It seemed to be something that was affecting us all. Periodically on our trek, one of us would have a brief coughing fit. The wear from the last 2 days was surely starting to set in. "It is the blood of the crustacean dogs," Amadi said. "The connection I have with Earth allows me to sense such things. There is impurity in their blood," he explained. "We are lucky not to have been bitten by them, as their saliva has higher levels of this impurity." "A warrior Earth manipulator that has the mind of a healer. You are a rarity indeed, Amadi," I said, to which he scoffed. "I am no warrior. I am a herbalist." His words brought me great surprise. His willingness to fight in the face of great danger and comprehension of earth manipulation was like that of a warrior. I know not of why the Guardians invaded Echo, why the insects attacked, or even why I am here, but I will live on. He looked at me sternly. There was no longer frustration and anger in his chi, as it was the night previous, but there was a resound determination that gleamed from his eyes, seeing it without the use of any ability. We started climbing the escarpment slowly. Our chi retracted to avoid the attention of the crustaceans. The climb was long and arduous, but eventually the rock and soil that comprised the bottom half of the cliff made way for a familiar sensation. The roots of the jungle. We had finally made it clear of the canyon. Both joy and relief overtook my chi as I continued to climb. But I sensed something. Deep within the cracks of the roots, there was something moving toward us. Before I could react, a small mist dispersed right above Amadi, which was followed by a blood-curdling scream that made the tips of my ears quiver. My eyes were closed from his bone-chilling cry, but my earth senses revealed to me how badly he had been burned by this mist. "Amadi!" I cried out. The head protection he had fashioned out of the ant's exoskeleton melted onto his face, while any part of his exposed skin peeled, and his blood boiled as he collapsed back toward the canyon. Something that appeared to be hairy burst through the branches of the escarpment, shattering the roots. I immediately called upon the waning energy of the sun within me to keep from falling back into the canyon, shooting a ball of the sun's energy at whatever it was that ambushed us. The recoil from such a blast of energy only pushed me further away from the target. I shot more blasts at the insect, catching a glimpse of its brown fur and long snout. Cursed thing! I rushed toward the bird variant, but a ringing in my ear sounded after I was struck from the side. I sensed multiple vibrations rushing toward me as my back hit the escarpment. I erected the strongest sun shield I could form, sensing the rapid-flying crustacean variants converging on me. Their blood splattered on me as their bodies exploded from smashing into the barrier. The bird variant was well off in the distance when I finished being swarmed. I shot toward it, but had to use deterioration on more of the crustaceans that sensed me. "Amadi!" I heard the Easterner cry out, zipping past me down into the canyon. I did not see the bird drop him, but I followed the Easterner, the crustacean variants on our heels. We broke the soil of one of the traps in the canyon, flying through a narrow passageway in the mud. I looked back and extended my palm, deteriorating the crustaceans at our feet. The Easterner and I both stopped abruptly. The narrow passageway led into an underground cavern filled with soil and roots. We both became hesitant, sensing what dwelled at the bottom of the cave. "Omiran!" I heard the Easterner whisper, as we sensed the massive insect. That word, he had used it previously with Amadi. Was this the monster Amadi spoke of? It certainly could be described as such. It had the thickest exoskeleton of all the variants I had encountered, and was much larger than the bird variant and greater in stature than the faceless variants. Its mandibles were far longer and sharper than any broadsword a guardian could yield. It was eyeless, like the crustacean variants that dwelled with it. It contained many fleshy tendrils, the same worm-like creatures that would occasionally poke out of the bottom of boulders to reach for us when we traversed the canyon. This grotesque abomination of Tambura was what controlled them. I was glad to sense something so immense and terrifying was sleeping, or at least was emitting vibrations that suggested it was sleeping. Still, I did not want to go down there. What's more, we were stuck. More crustacean variants filled the hole, making their way toward their slain kin. We knew by now to retract our chi when those variants were around to remain undetected, but they were slowly walking toward us. "Amadi!" the Easterner whispered to me, pointing down, passing his words along the earth. I hesitated for a long while, having to kneel down and go onto my stomach as the crustacean variants neared. I retracted my chi and vibrations from the earth, letting their prickly legs press into my skin. We were forced to stay deathly still while they passed over us. Luckily, they did not attack. Our chi so faint the blind insects could not distinguish us from the soil. The creatures confused me. My skin was very much different from the soil, yet they walked over me as if there was no difference. They did not have eyes. Judging by the way they would swarm when attacking, and the sounds they made, I could only assume they were like bats in the way they detected. However, it was only certain types of vibrations that they could detect as movement. The use of sunflight or walking regularly, without retracting our chi, seemed to attract them. I was still hesitant watching the Easterner crawl toward the cavern, when the crustaceans had passed and made their way deeper into their nest. I had grown a fondness for Amadi, but having sensed the extent of his injuries caused by the bird's acid, it was unlikely that he was alive if it dropped him into this cave. I did not see the creature drop him, but I believed the Easterner. I would not follow him, though. The opening leading back into the canyon was just above us, much closer and safer than where he wanted to go. The Easterner was a capable sun, wind and earth manipulator from what I observed, harnessing comprehension of the elements that likely made him an effective assassin. I believed him, but I questioned his judgment. I recalled Amadi telling me about the impurities in the crustacean's blood. Perhaps delusion caused by illness was starting to set in for the Easterner. Perhaps the fungus that was in the food in this land affected him too. We had been scrambling for survival since arriving here. Perhaps losing someone like Amadi was his breaking point. Either way, I would not follow him into certain suicide. Rara! I heard his hurried whisper along the earth when I started crawling in the opposite direction toward the canyon. I did not acknowledge him and maintained my slow, methodical climb, being slight with every movement, paying close attention to the twitch of my muscles to avoid detection while pinning myself along the soil. The Easterner continued whispering to me as I crawled my way toward the opening, which was now in sight, only that the soil here was very thin. There would not be any way to crawl out without the use of sunflight, which would alert the nest of crustaceans milling about in the cavern below. There was silence from the Easterner. Escaping in such a manner could possibly get him killed if he didn't remain calm when the creatures swarmed. You are a capable manipulator, dear Easterner. May Tambura favor you. I whispered, sending my voice along the vibrations of the soil for it to reach him. I ignited, using the sun's energy to propel me upward toward the opening, the humid air immediately engulfing me as I resurfaced. A cold sensation on my ankle brought a chill to my spine. The sensation spread across my entire lower body when I noticed my flames started waning. The sun's energy was not very strong in me, having relied on them so heavily for the past few days, along with hunger setting in. But I should have been able to fly. Confusion gripped me as the cold sensation spread throughout my back and upper body, and I came hurling back toward the canyon, unable to use sunflight, unable to move. While falling, I noticed a flesh tendril latched onto my ankle. One of the giant creature's feelers poked out of the hole I tried to escape from. Damn! I lamented inwardly, sensing the vibrations of multiple crustaceans converging on me fast. Before I could react, there was a bright flash, followed by a spray of the creature's blood. There was complete darkness shortly after I hit the ground, and a sharp pain ran through the side of my body. Numbness overtook my body shortly thereafter. The chi of the Easterner was nearby. The both of us were in an encasing of stone he had formed after killing the crustaceans that had converged on me. The encasing rattled violently as it was bombarded with more crustaceans. Their laughing battle cry echoed menacingly with every dusty rumble of our protection. The Easterner started shouting at me once the bombardment stopped. "Keep your voice down!" I snapped. "You are understandably upset with me, but you must understand how foolish your reasoning was. Amadi is surely dead," I said, to which he cut me off in his tongue and continued shouting, his chi rushing with a ferocious fire. Our argument caused more rumbling and rocking of the encasing from the creature's attacks. The encasing would not hold, its structural compromise becoming more apparent with every hit. Although my body was numb, immobile, and the sun's energy was too weak within me, I still had full use of my earth senses and abilities. I closed my eyes, focusing on the heavy vibrations of the stone the Easterner had formed, noticing the cracks and holes in them. I commanded the earth to mimic the damaged material in an attempt to repair it. The crustaceans attacked the encasing in greater force after I started applying the repairing technique, seemingly angered by the vibrations emitted by the reforming stones. It was strange how the creatures were able to detect the very minute shift in vibrations emitted by the technique. I surmised the tendrils running down their bony carapace were able to detect such things, as if the squirming tuft enabled the crustaceans to have sensing abilities that rivaled most earth manipulators. A growing number of them gathered along the outside of the enclosure, charging into it head first, each time breaking off parts of our stone protection, forcing me to hasten the repairs which only attracted more of them. I figured the Easterner would eventually abandon me if the earth encasing could not be maintained. A sun shield would have been a much more efficient means of protection from the creatures for him. But he stayed in place, arms outstretched toward the protection's walls, focusing on maintaining the structure's overall integrity, choosing to give me a chance at survival. Had I been a capable enough water manipulator, I could rid my blood of whatever it was that was making me compromised. The more repairs I was able to make, the more crustaceans would gather. The further the encasing would crumble. Continuing would destroy the encasing. I had to stop as the Easterner continued to strain himself. I sensed his veins bulging from his neck as he stayed in place with his hands outstretched, maintaining the structural integrity of the enclosure. It would not hold much longer. I desperately yearned for the stone to hold. Perhaps if the Easterner was familiar with forming metal, the encasing could withstand the constant barrages. But how was I to form metal from stone in such a short amount of time? Such things were indeed possible, but the process required time and close attention. Moreover, the vibrational shifting would likely anger the crustaceans even further. The encasing became even more compromised from the non-ending barrages. The carapace of the crustaceans matched the thickness of the stone encasing, making me recall the very first time I used deterioration on the faceless variants, the feel of the silicate and crystal in their armor. I refocused my attention to the damaged stones, carefully shifting the vibrations of the stone to mimic what I was imagining, hoping that the material was closer to stone than metal, which could hasten the reforming process. It worked. I had successfully reformed a small piece of stone into the same material that the faceless insect's exoskeleton was made out of. The stone would not hold up much longer if I could not reform the damaged parts of the encasing fast enough. The crustaceans attacked with more ferocity. When I tried reforming a larger portion of the shield, I was unable to hide the vibrational shifting from their very keen senses. I focused on the most critical areas along the top of the encasing, being sure to move as carefully as possible when reforming. I lay on my back, still unable to move. The sun manipulator with his hands outstretched, his chi even more strained and fatigued. Both of us forcing ourselves to be calm, to both avoid detection and focus on improving the integrity of our only protection from the creatures. Their bombardment had slowed down considerably, leaving me more time to reform. Many of the critical most parts of the shield had been repaired when sensation and movement finally returned to my left arm. I was largely unfamiliar with the material I was trying to form, so the use of a hand sign aided greatly and sped up the process. We would be safe in the encasing for the night. In the morning, when the creatures were less active, we would scale the escarpment once again. "Hey," I whispered along the earth to the Easterner, who sat in place, anger deep within his retracted chi. "Thank you," I said to him. He only just stared at me. The anger hidden within his chi shook in his eyes from what I could sense in the darkness, and slowly turned away from me without saying a word. Chapter 14. I paused during our climb, observing the crater in the escarpment the bird variant made after ambushing us last night. Amadi was surely long dead, likely consumed by the crustaceans, or by the giant slumbering variant the Easterner called Omiran. I wanted very much to observe the crater. How was something so large able to fit in there? Was that its dwelling? Was it waiting for us? There was no time for such things. The Easterner climbed quickly without even so much as acknowledging the crater, anger still very much in his chi. He whispered something under his breath once we finished the climb, and inundated himself with static charges. Hunger had fully set. My ribs burned as my stomach rumbled with great force, my vision dizzy as I lay on my back, panting from the stress of the climb. I forced myself off of my back onto my wobbly and tired knees to try to go after him. The anger I sensed in him had transformed into a murderous rage. As he rushed toward an encampment with smoke rising from it, a familiar glimmer caught my eye before I could sense just who exactly was at the camp. Undoubtedly, the gold glimmer that caught my attention was indeed guardian armor belonging to a general. The chi I sensed coming from the camp was strong, far stronger than what both of us could handle. Moreover, we needed rest. "Stop," I called out to the Easterner. He would not hear me. I ran toward him, but he utilized sunflight to rush toward the guardians occupying the camp. Both of us were stopped in our tracks by the general, who utilized his own, much faster sunflight to meet us ahead of the camp's entrance. The Easterner snarled at him, surely swearing at him and cursing him in his tongue. "Calm yourself," I ordered. I knew this particular general, not personally, but I knew of him. He was the one that was in charge of overseeing the trade of slaves between us and the insects. The Easterner would still not hear me, acting as if possessed by his own rage, seemingly out of character for him. He rushed at the general, all of his collective rage inundated throughout his body in flames and electrical charges, and collided with the general despite my attempts to keep the peace. The general merely slapped him to the side, as if swatting a fly. The crash the Easterner made when hit by the general was surely too loud. I fully expected to hear buzzing in response to the brief skirmish, but there was only silence as smoke rose from the crater the Easterner made when he hit the surface of the boulder. "Oh dear." The general smiled with a chuckle. I seemed to have angered the poor boy for past transgressions. I found his smile to be far more menacing and haunting than all of the insects we had encountered until this point. There was a genuine joy radiating from him after flooring the Easterner in such a swift manner. The two seemed to have history. "General Emba, leader of the Echo Annexation Front," he said, pinning his right fist to his chest. "Agent Arimonu," I stated, pinning my fist to my chest and prostrating to the general. "Ah yes, the spy," the general said with a smile. His comfort was unsettling. I was unsure what to say next. "Are there any others, sir?" I asked. "A few, not many," he said. "Every day we come here with our smoke signal. We get fewer survivors each day." "Each day, sir?" I was confused. It had only been 2 days since waking up. "The insects seem to wake you poor souls in waves. Yours is the latest, and the least." There were many that were in the cave with me when we were woken up, more than I could remember being traded by the guardians. "Just how many of us do they have, sir?" "More than we anticipated, far more. We underestimated them," the general stated with a distant gaze. "And even now, they have ravished Eastern Adam, undoing the unity we brought there. I'll say this as plainly as possible, Agent. Your mission is over. We have to return home." There was a surge of emotion. How could this have happened? Was he not in charge of the dealing between the guardians and the insects? How could they possibly have so many Adịmians in their possession in such a short amount of time? Was it a short amount of time? "How long were we in the insect's mind?" I asked, the sides of my head aching, my thoughts still racing, unable to accept what I was just told. Oddly, there was a slight agitation deep within the general's chi, impatience perhaps. "Agent, the afternoon sun casts soon. This escarpment will be a feeding ground for the wasp-like creatures that frequent this place. Unless you wish to become a meal, you'd better follow us," the general said, signaling for his soldiers to collect the Easterner from his smoldering hole. "General, pardon my probing, but as the auxiliary for this mission, I must know all the variables," I said, to which the general peered at me. This time there was nothing slight about his emotion. A raging fire burned within his chi, such raw power only befitting for a general. "How were they able to capture so many?" I asked, ignoring my fear of him, in order to stick with my mission parameters. If we lived, we would all have to stand trial for the mission failure. If deemed to be because of incompetence, we would all be killed. I needed answers. "That would require me breaking your memory restraints," the general said. "Very well." I agreed. Not here, only where 'tis safe. The trek off the escarpment was much faster. The insects did not seem to be as active during sunlight, so there was no need to use any stealth techniques. We cleared the plains for another trek in the jungle. Sensing the vegetation made my stomach rumble. The nutrient-rich cream within the giant leaves made me doubt my earlier decision of choosing not to consume it. I tried my best to suppress these feelings deep within my chi, so as to not alert the general. He was the type to lead with fear, making me have a natural mistrust of him. But he was certainly capable of slaughtering the insects. The forest was oddly quiet. No croaks or buzzing, just the sound of wind rushing against the trees and the occasional spot of sunlight through the jungle's nutrient-rich cover. I watched as the Easterner lay flung across the shoulders of one of the guardians. He was very weak and in need of the care of a healer, but he would live. I recalled his brief exchange with the general. The sight of the superior to these soldiers invoked such a strong anger in him. It was surprising, given his otherwise calm demeanor. It was as if him and the general were enemies. Getting him to work with us when he was healed would be difficult. His abilities are too valuable to waste. I decided to talk to the general about the sun manipulator. I had to ensure no harm came to him, especially now that we need the numbers. "No harm shall come to him," the general assured me. We eventually cleared the jungle for a shoreline of bright red sand and green water. The insect's land was so foreign to what I knew it did not even seem as if it was on the same world as Adam. I became disappointed that I did not have more knowledge about such a land. Perhaps if we are able to defeat the insects, Adịmian scientists would study the strangeness of this land. We walked along the bright red shores for a short while before coming upon a small stone structure that erected from the sand. I sensed a large space beneath the structure containing multiple human vibrations. There were many inside, sitting, resting, eating. A grave feeling befell me when I sensed that not only were they eating the fungus-laden vegetation, but also roasting and consuming parts of the insects in the fires they made. The general turned to me, likely sensing the angst I was incapable of subduing within my chi. "The fungus is harmless to us," the general said, as if reading my thoughts. "The insects need it for digestion. None of them can survive without it. It is what enables them to grow to such staggering sizes." I do not know how the general was able to surmise this, but his comprehension of the earth was greater than mine. I could easily sense this in his vibrations. I nodded, knowing that asking further questions would likely aggravate him. He seemed disassociated from the situation, too light, too cheerful and upbeat, given things had taken a turn for the worst. Perhaps it was how the general dealt with extreme stress. It was a surprise to see so many had survived. Most that awoke with me did not fight, succumbing to their fear. But as the general stated earlier, the insects woke us up in waves. Myself and the Easterner were likely the only survivors from our wave. I thought about the previous night, about Ahmadi. My fists began to clench. It was still unclear why the insects were doing this. Our affiliates surmised that they wished to harness our elemental manipulation abilities. Why would they bring us back to their land, only to hunt and consume us? I scanned the room, hoping to sense Sorochi's vibrations. Perhaps he had more information from the affiliates. But there was nothing. He was not here. I sighed, fearing that Sorochi may have been met with a similar fate to Amadi, despite his tremendously vast chi. I would not get any answers by looking and sensing around. The general needed me at my best if we were to leave this land, and if that meant undoing my suppressed memories, so be it. General Mba's soldiers tended to the Easterner, laying him down and performing healing techniques on him. "This way, Agent," General Mba said, leading me to the far end of the underground dwelling. We sat across from each other. The general placed a hand on my forehead. Chapter 15. The scorching rays of the three suns cast a golden haze which radiated from the giant doors of King Ndubisi's palace. I could not feel my legs, but I kept walking, my heart feeling as if it would beat out of my chest. Even when heading into battle, my mind was calm, just as it was before the battle against those monstrous creatures. What were they? Insects. The earth told me they certainly were, but so giant and intelligent. I had been calm in battle then. Yet, as I approached the golden gates of the palace's main quarters, I struggled to compose myself. There he was behind the guardian that opened the gates. The king I served, a man revered by many and feared by all, standing taller than any man I had ever seen. "Arimonu, a fine soldier indeed. Please, sit," the king said to me, his powerful voice echoing throughout the hall. I was deathly still. That name, one which was given to me by my battlemaster. It was a name which I answered proudly. Still, it was as if the king was talking to someone else. I quickly sat in the seat. King Ndubisi motioned toward once one of the guards touched the metal plating on my shoulder. King Ndubisi sat across from me, adorned in jewels and golden piercings that sparkled, illuminating the already immense radiation coming from his chi, with his renowned horned crown atop his head. "You have garnered quite the reputation for yourself." The king smiled. I did not know what to say. This was about the battle. Surely it had to be. I was but a mere constructor, yes. I was capable in battle. But I was no longer a warrior. I was a guardian in an era of peace. I simply killed out of necessity because we were being overrun by those things. "Tell me about your time in the West," the king said, while one of the guardians around the table manipulated the vibrations of a gold-encrusted ram's horn nearby to float toward me. I paused, wondering if I should tell the king all that happened. The king's chi was welcoming and warm. A slight smile curved the side of his mouth, and his eyes held an inquisitive interest. "I was stationed at the main outpost in central Messina," I began, clearing my throat. Day-to-day was rather monotonous, building communication structures and transportways, escorting dignitaries. "Boring things for a soldier of your capabilities, I'm sure," the king stated. "Indeed, my king," I smiled. I was delighted to be relieved of my duties when I was repositioned closer to the coast. "What happened there?" the king asked. There was something in his voice, not the same intrigue he had earlier, something different. He sounded amused. It was slight, as subtle as the twitch of a muscle. "My regiment was charged with dismantling a slaver conglomerate that operated there." "And was your regiment successful?" the king asked. I fell silent for a moment. How was I to answer this? Yes, my king, we were. The conglomerate was dismantled, and its heads were dealt with accordingly. King Ndubisi stared at me, waiting for... No, expecting me to say more. But we... How was I to tell this next part? How was the king to believe me? I myself could not even believe what happened, and I was involved in it. My commander made me swear to secrecy after the battle, and I had gladly forgotten about it until now. The slavers, I continued, clearing my throat once again and wiping sweat from my brow. They were selling slaves to someone, something foreign, something not of this land, something not human. Describe them, King Ndubisi calmly asked. I quickly scanned the room, looking at all the guardians present at the round table, all of them staring at me intently. I was taken back by the king's calmness. They were insects, or at least insect-like. Only that they were at very least 5 times greater in size to any person, heavily armored and hard to kill. Above all, I hesitated again, glancing at my twiddling fingers, unable to meet the king's gaze. It seemed as if they could control the slaves somehow, indoctrinating them, perhaps through wind manipulation of some kind. We were unable to save the slaves from their grasp. I peered up through my brow, fully expecting the king to be offended for entertaining what he surely must have thought to be nonsense. But instead, King Ndubisi exchanged glances with his personal guards around the table. The slight smile at the side of his mouth from earlier returned. It is time for your next assignment, young guardian, King Ndubisi said, his smile widening. You will conduct a covert surveillance mission among the very insects you have described to me. My hands started tingling. Me? Why me? Were there not more qualified soldiers among the king's personal guard? Or specialized assassins and spies, perhaps? I could think of a few renowned wind manipulators that could easily traverse the most fortified mines and lands. The call to action can freeze the most capable of soldiers, young guardian, King Ndubisi said. We have been aware of the insects' existence for some time. They may appear to be mindless animals, fulfilling the basic orders dictated to them by Tambura, but they are intelligent and vast. Their queen is both calculated and fanatical. She will not stop until the last Adịmian is subjugated within her greedy grasp. The king's words were bone-chilling. The empire is expanding, and very soon this entire land will feel the blessings of Tambura. But the insects threaten that. Will you answer the call, Arimonu, young guardian of warrior blood? I will, my king, I said without a moment's hesitation. King Ndubisi nodded with a gracious grin and looked toward one of his personal guards. The man who housed an unusual chi stood from his chair at the far end of the room and walked to me, placing a thumb on my forehead once he was close. There was an intense pressure throughout my entire body until there was nothing but a gentle light with a yellow hue and my mission parameters. Collect, deceive, return. Chapter 16. Agent, wake up. A man's voice sounded in my head as my vision slowly returned. I did not recognize it. I scanned the cave right away to see who spoke to me. There was no sign of the general or his soldiers, but there were still fires lit throughout. I rushed to my feet immediately. Well, where is the general? I asked the person nearest to me, my vision blurry and body weak from the ordeal of having my memory restored. I need more information before our escape. I tried to explain. There was very little reaction coming from the person I tried speaking to. They are not aware. The voice returned again. Who is not aware? Who said that? I snapped sharply, turning to meet the voice. But there was no one behind or beside me. Just more people in the dwelling seated around the various fires located throughout. In fact, it did not seem as if anyone had taken notice of me at all. I paused, collecting myself for a moment, before observing everyone present. Their vibrations felt slow and sluggish, their chi and inner radiance only slightly disturbed as if being awoken from a deep slumber. What is the matter with all of you? Hear me, agent. You must leave this place. The general is not to be trusted. Who said that? I shouted, flames engulfing my fists and static charges running throughout my body. Still, the only people in the dwelling were seated around fires. I walked about the dwelling, searching for the voice before planting my feet firmly into the red sand to sense where the general was. The signatures of both him and his soldiers were missing. A sharp ringing between my ears brought me to my knees. The earth revealed to me a location a vast distance away, too far for me to traverse alone in this hostile and unknown land. I am a friend. Find me here. the voice said, returning my senses with it. The direction given to me with the set of instructions was strange. Initially, it felt as if the place was too far to get to quickly, assuming I could escape this land. It could take days. But when the voice left, the destination seemed very close by, as if underneath me. It was a strange sensation indeed, being as though there were no tunnels, caverns, or caves I could sense underneath my hands and feet. Their meat can cause madness initially, but your body will adjust. Another voice spoke. I hesitated at first, not because I was thinking I had been slowly creeping into madness, but because I recognized the voice. I turned to meet the gaze of General Emba. His menacing eyes bore down on me as if he pitied me, his inner radiance burning with rage. I stood immediately, sensing something off about the general. "Where is the rest of the regiment? We should mobilize soon," I said, backing away from the general, ignoring the fact that I had been made to consume the insect's flesh while unconscious. "Never mind that, Agent," he rebutted, following me. "Removing the memory suppression placed upon you was hard on your body. Even your appearance is different. You need rest, and more sustenance." I sensed movement nearby as I felt my face. It had indeed changed, morphed back to its natural state. A few of the Adịmians I had tried to talk to earlier stood up, retrieving something from the fire they sat around. The general chuckled, noticing my disturbed vibrations after sensing the charred exoskeleton of an insect. "Do not fight the madness, Agent. You will find bliss in the whisper of the insects once you consume their meat." General Emba's words, carried by his forlorn voice, confirmed my fears. Just like the slavers and slaves my regiment had battled over one cycle ago on the western coast, he too had become indoctrinated, working on behalf of the insects, which meant everyone in this cave was under their influence. I lunged at the general, shooting a large single burst of flame from my fist before spinning mid-air, swiping toward the general with the sun's energy around my heel. I succeeded in getting the general to move to the side, giving me the opportunity to dismantle the top of the structure and escape with the use of sunflight. I quickly burst out of the dwelling toward the sea. I knew not of how long the journey back to Adim would be, or if I was even capable of making it back, but I had to leave this land. It did not take long before I heard the dreadful hum of buzzing coming from behind me. I glanced back, and sure enough, there looked to be smoke in the distance, over the horizon. I heard a low chuckle that made the hairs on my arm stand. "You remind me of myself." General Emba's voice sounded in my head. It was not the same voice from earlier that woke me up and warned me about him, but I heard it in the same manner. I continued flying on, ignoring it. "You cannot defeat the insects, Agent. Tambura wills it so. They are not the enemy after all. We are rather one with them." "Spare me your rationalization, traitor," I snapped. "You think me to be a traitor. It is only because you lack insight." "And what insight is that?" "Like us, the insects are but a higher form of existence. We are both machinations of Tambura, but different pieces. And the pieces must come together to make a whole. It is Tambura's will." "Is it Tambura's will to sell people into servitude of the insects, so they can be used as tools, like yourself?" I chided. "My memories have returned, General. I know of your name. You have a feared reputation among guardians. Your abilities are exceptional, but you are weak in mind and spirit." The general only laughed at my words, as if I had told a joke that left him pleasantly amused. "And you are strong in spirit. It is a shame your ignorance surpasses your intellect." From the smoke in the distance behind me emerged a powerful and menacing chi. The vast and raging inner radiance I sensed was that of the general. He was rushing toward me at a blinding speed. I stopped flying, aware I could not outrun him. He stopped in front of me within a few moments, his piercing glance peering at me with the same degree of pity from before. His comprehension of the sun's energy was so great, he did not have to shoot fire or electricity from his fists or feet, and instead only slightly glowed as he hovered in front of me. "I plead with you, Agent. Join me." I serve King Ndubisi, the great Adịmian unifier. Whom do you serve? I asked. We engaged each other as sun manipulators, using the sun's radiance to throw quick and powerful blows with all of our limbs. I was quicker than the general, landing on him at will, while he struggled to land blows on me as I blocked and dodged the majority of his strikes. We would continue like this for a long while, both of us using sunflight underneath the moon to keep ourselves high above the sea as we fought each other hand to hand. My chi started waning. Sunflight was not a technique that could be used indefinitely, especially against the likes of the general. My muscles started to beg for oxygen. My movement slowed, and my strikes stopped becoming sharp. The general smirked, noticing this as my strikes became increasingly easier for him to evade and block. Eventually, his strikes I could evade with ease started to land on me with hard thuds. The strikes I would have been otherwise able to block started hurting my forearms, hands, and shins, where the blows were absorbed. The general was going to slowly kill me, and was enjoying it from the delighted vibrations I sensed within him after every successful blow he started landing on me. I wiped away blood from the corner of my mouth after I had been struck there, knowing the conclusion of this battle was nearing. I rushed at the general with the same technique I used earlier when trying to escape from him, or where he expected the kick to follow. I swung the kick at the general, my heel carrying the sun's energy. The general grabbed my calf, killing the sun's energy with water manipulation, as I expected. Such a technique required the general to overpower my chi, meaning he was locked onto my vibrations at a deep level, and just as he was locked onto me, I was also locked onto him. I traversed his vibrations until I got to the cold, heavy, and static vibrations of his armor. Utilizing the separation technique I had used on the insects, I shattered the armor on his arm, exposing his shoulder. With my free foot, I shot electrical bursts at his shoulder, catching the general by surprise, making his muscles seize until he was forced to release the chi lock he had on me, freeing me from his grasp. He swung at me with a fire blade. I ducked, destroying the armor around his stomach before shooting electrical bolts at his exposed area. I hurt him, but he would not yield. He absorbed the electrical currents and started overpowering my chi again, forcing me to sever the link before being completely overrun. He turned to face me, a deranged smile across his face as he unsheathed his weapon. It was a broadsword, but its malleability changed when he added the sun's energy to it, making it appear more like a glowing, three-pronged whip. He lashed the weapon at me. Not only did the whip glow with the power of the sun's energy, but it was also inundated with static charges. It contained a far higher amount of the sun's energy than my body could yield. Being touched by such a weapon would surely be my demise. I evaded the blow, but the whip was far more malleable than I expected. I had to make a series of defensive maneuvers to evade the whip's touch fully. I had to destroy that weapon. The sun's energy that was flowing through it was too great to simply overpower and break. Moreover, my chi was waning even further from having to engage in battle while simultaneously making use of sunflight. The general used wind manipulation to compress and burst the air around my ears, discombobulating me. I felt a sharp sting on my thigh where his weapon struck. My muscles soon seized as fire engulfed my body. There was a quick moment of excruciating, searing pain from the burn, but soon after nothing. No pain, no feeling in my body, just the blurry sight of me falling from the night sky toward the sea. Chapter 17. "Awake, agent," a familiar voice in my head shouted. My vision was hazy and my body heavy, as if I was in a slumber, but I was already seated around a campfire, eating. I looked down to see an insect appendage in my hand, its innards hanging partially between my mouth and its limb. The smell alone was enough to make my stomach retch. It was hard to describe, aside from the meat being a strong scent that was both unmistakable and nauseating. I struggled to breathe with each convulse, fluid and insect entrails spilling from the depths of my stomach in great volume as I retched. Assessing my surroundings when I was finished, I had been seated with more docile individuals who continued eating the insect's body parts. "Ah, Amadi?" I asked, as my heart dropped into the pit of my stomach. My voice, hardly able to speak past a low rasp. Seeing the short, stocky earth manipulator brought me great confusion. He was not burned or scarred. In fact, he looked to be in perfect health with a chi that was fully intact and as strong as ever. He continued eating away, a distant look in his eye, unresponsive to me or my actions. I stood to my feet, my chi weak, my vibrations unsteady and wavered, my vision slightly blurry, a dull pain in my stomach and on either side of my temples. Around the fire sat the Easterner as well, an identical glossiness in his gaze as he continued to eat from the insect appendage in his hands. "You need to flee, Guardian," the voice said. "Who said that? Who are you?" I lashed out, rapidly checking my surroundings, my voice hardly able to make it past a whisper. I was back in the jungle on the insect's homeland, but there was no one around aside from the docile Adịmians seated around me. "The general is near. You need to flee before you become fully indoctrinated. There is little time. Find me here," the voice said. What followed was a sensation detected by my earth senses, a location far off in the distance. Despite my weak and unsteady state, I used the vibrations of the massive mushroom-shaped trees to propel me toward this location. Pellets, electrical charges, and balls of flames followed shortly after I took off. My chi was too weak for battle, my vibrations too unsteady to think clearly. I became so focused on evading the projectiles, I lost track of the location that was given to me. Earth flight was a technique that should have been otherwise easy to employ for a long while given I was in a jungle, but I started to become out of breath after only a few moments of using the technique. I stopped on a branch hidden within the thick covering of the foreign tree, wheezing, fighting to get air back into my lungs, my vision blurred with every gasp. Sweat ran from my forehead to the tip of my nose before pouring onto the bark as I stood hunched over with my hands pressed against the ground. "You were so close." I heard the general's voice in my head after trying to use earth sense to assess my surroundings. I retracted my chi right away and went to propel myself along the trees. A sharp pain stung my Achilles as I broke cover. I crashed, landed onto the next tree, unable to support my weight from the injury I sustained. Blood from my leg spilled onto the branch and dripped onto the forest floor as I laid there, tired, unable to will myself to my feet. "You mustn't quit, Guardian," the voice said. Stop talking." I struggled to say, trying to plead with the voice. "If I am to die, I do not want to die in a state of madness. Let my mind be clear." "Agent, your mission is not over. You must get up right now." "And go where?" I snapped. Still, my voice was hoarse. "The distance which you have shared with me is too far away. I could not make it there even if I begged the sun, the earth, or even the sea for permission." "It may seem far away, Guardian, but this great distance you speak of is within you." Another sensation overtook me, a familiar one. The distance that initially seemed so great seemed as if it was underneath me. I focused deeper on this sensation, following it, allowing it to guide me, coming to the realization that the destination was in fact within me. Amadi and the Easterner landed on the branch I rested on, their vibrations just as undetectable as the crustaceans. Had I not been looking at them in front of me, I would not have known they were there. "The time for convergence has come, Agent Arimonu," Amadi said in an uncharacteristic monotone, slowly walking forward. "Join your mind with the collective and become one, as Tambura intended." The Easterner added, speaking perfect Lenga without a foreign accent. Both of their eyes were lifeless, their actions, their words, were not their own. I considered the words of the voice and the location it gave me, along with who was approaching me. Amadi had been killed. If the acid did not kill him, either the bird variant or the Omiran would have. His being here meant only one thing. I was still in the insect's mind. And surely by now, my identity as a spy would have been discovered by the insects. I let the sun's energy flow through me, sensing the chi of the general and his soldiers landing onto the tree. I hastened my plan and started to let the sun's energy consume my body, allowing the fire, electricity, and energy to spill from my body. It was painful at first, feeling my skin melt and my blood boil, but I continued until there was no pain. Chapter 18. I was formless, moving through what looked like the night sky, feeling as if I was being pulled towards something familiar. It contained the sun's energy. Indeed, it was the destination given to me by the voice in my head. In this state, my sensing was keen despite not having a physical body. There seemed to be layers in this destination. At first, the strong energy of the sun radiated from the source as it drew me in. Beneath the radiance, there was earth. It was a sensation that was both peculiar and unusual, as if the destination I was being drawn to was manufactured somehow, perhaps another corridor. A bright light pulled me in. 3 distinct signatures provided a focal point as a physical state formed, providing me with a body, weight, and direction. I found myself in the dark corridor again, the solid, static, and grainy ground underneath my feet. But it was different. Despite looking the exact same, somehow it felt foreign. I could not explain it. But it felt as if I was not supposed to be here. "You came after all," an old man said, smiling. I recognized his voice right away. The voice that talked to me when the insects nearly took my mind. "Who are you?" I asked. I recognized his voice, but I did not know him. My senses relayed to me the long blue robe he wore with patterns and designs that suggested he was a southerner from one of the nomadic healer clans. "I am a friend, young guardian," he said. His smile was warm, his vibrations non-deceptive. "You've done well," a familiar voice said, before I was patted on the shoulder. Rage filled me as I saw Sorochi staring back at me, his form more normal-looking, but his chi unmistakable. "I could have used your help," I said, suppressing my anger. He only smiled and looked me directly in the eyes as if studying me. "There is not much time. He has been marked." "What do you speak of?" I asked, shoving him away. "The insects have come to know you," an unfamiliar voice said. I recoiled when I saw who spoke. Its vibrations were nearly human, but its appearance was similar to that of a bipedal lizard or a frog. Indeed, the very same lizardman we encountered on the Guardian's ship, the very same that told me the insect's plan before I found myself on the insect homeland. It spoke Lenga as if it were Adịmian. Only, its lips did not move. "Please, do not be alarmed," it asked of me as I inundated myself with static charges. "You are an insect," I said, clenching my jaws. The lizard man raised his palms to me. "The insects formed my kind to serve as cattle. We no longer view them as gods like in the times of my forefathers. My kind and your kind are allies." There was no deception in the lizard man's vibrations, but I doubted my senses. The insects proved to be excellent ambush hunters. Perhaps this was another form of their deception. I observed the old man that called out to me and Sorochi. Surely they were both indoctrinated. "What do you need from me?" I asked calmly, being sure to mask my vibrations. "Your mission has not ended, but the parameters have changed," said Sorochi. Similar words to General Emba. "And what parameters are those?" "The insects have come to know you." The old man interjected, stepping between myself and Sorochi, as if he could sense my mistrust. "It does not matter where you go or how you mask your chi. The general relayed your signature to their consensus. You have been compromised." His words brought a burning to my chest. This was the same thing General Emba told me. Only the situation was different. The insects had masterfully fooled me into thinking I was no longer trapped in their consciousness. I was now aware of where I was, but being told I needed to escape. More of their lies. "We will pass your chi to the affiliates. You will be given a new body in the physical realm and will return to the collective. I glared at Sorochi, unsure of him. Was he indoctrinated? Was he even real? Passing my chi to others to occupy a new body? Such things were not possible. Mere stories told by elders to entertain curious minds. I know it seems impossible, and you mistrust us, young guardian, but we do not lie. The old man said. We are running out of time, the lizardman added. Just as it spoke, the entire corridor rumbled. They have found us, it added, worry in its tone. Agent, the feeling of unease you felt when coming to this secret corridor, Sorochi stated, returning his attention to me. What of it? I asked. You consumed their flesh when they were studying you, yes? I did not answer. Just as they have come to know you, you have come to know them and their environment. This place feels wrong to you because your body innately knows this corridor was not formed by an insect. I was unsure of what Sorochi was getting at. The corridor shook with greater force. Worry spilled from all three of them. Eating their food in such a state melds their minds with yours. You begin to think like them. It is the stage before full indoctrination. The old man added, Any insect would know this corridor was not created by one of their own and would seek to destroy it. You likely sense this corridor as being unnatural or wrong, the lizard man explained. I understood. Interacting with the insect's environment helped me learn about them, which is why being in such a place made me uneasy. I felt as if I should not have agreed with them. I wanted to fight them, but I believed them to be right. More shaking of the corridor happened. We must do this now, Sorochi said calmly, despite a great worry in his chi. I nodded as both the lizardman and the old southerner stepped forward, both extending palms to me. The corridor shook with an even more violent ferocity. The darkness of the corridor disappeared with the last rumble, making way for only light. The place looked completely different, at first being similar to the insect's high-walled cave. Now there was just nothing but light. If I did not feel the grainy ground underneath my feet, I would have thought us to be in a cloud. On the far end of the corridor, there emanated a dreadfully familiar signature that burned like a raging fire. The signature of General Emba. I sensed him unsheathing his broadsword and induced it with the sun's energy to form his whip. We will send the prince back. Stall him. The old man said to Sorochi. I wanted firstly to plead with the old man not to let Sorochi be killed by the general. He had referred to me as a prince, the title given to me by Sorochi's affiliates. Curious, indeed, my memory was returned. I was not royalty. Just as I tried to open my mouth to protest, the old man and the lizard engulfed me in a warm embrace of the sun. I was completely still, unable to move or talk, while in such an embrace, unsure of what technique was being used. I could only watch on, seeing Sorochi's body return to a more inhuman form as he flew toward General Emba on the other side of the corridor. I was in shock watching what was unfolding. The immensity of Sorochi's chi was even greater than I had previously sensed. The extent of his abilities completely changed. His chi greatly surpassed the general's. I watched in curious shock again, as Sorochi then took the form of a serpent when he engaged the general. It was a technique only Earthmasters were capable of. Sorochi had been suppressing his true identity from me. But why, I thought, being lifted into the air by the encasing of warmth I was in? It looked as if Sorochi's form was too great for General Emba. The Guardian was outmatched, but just as the battle was about to commence, everything was suddenly dark. Chapter 19. There was fluttering in my stomach, as if I was falling. Wind rushed through the curls in my hair. I had a physical body, but I was falling. I rushed to orient myself, but found myself to be weightless, tossing, turning, and flipping, trying to find a point of reference to gauge my direction. I could not see much, because it was hard to tell where I was exactly. It was not a corridor. There was no ground or anything physical to touch. I seemed to be in a tunnel, perhaps. There was wind, and a rushing green light that seemed to be on the outside of the tunnel. The entire thing seemed to be composed of wind and clouds. I tried grabbing at something, anything, to break my fall, but there was nothing to hold on to. I grunted, trying to fight what was going on, trying to call upon the sun's power to aid me in flying out of here. Do not do what you are about to do if you wish to survive and complete your mission. A voice sounded in my head, the voice of the lizard man. What are you doing? Where is this? I called out. I am relaying what you call your chi back to your allies. Please, be still. The lizard man replied calmly. You will keep your memories. Suppressing them was understandable, but you will need the full extent of your mind for what is to come. What about Sorochi and the general? The one you call Sorochi is a master of stealth. It will continue to maneuver about the collective undetected until further orders. And the general? I asked. He can never truly die in the collective so long as it is allowed. The burning in my chest returned. You mustn't allow such things to anger you. It will make the transfer difficult. I listened, closing my eyes, focusing on slowing my breath and calming myself. You said you are an ally? Separate from the insects? Because they subjugate your kind? I asked the lizard man's voice. We are of the same ancestor, but are of different families. The insects, as you call them, birthed my kind and raised us to be their servants and cattle. They control our minds. Most of my kind are unaware of their servitude to them. But those like me seek to change that. A light shone from above. I had in fact been moving upward the entire time, the light finally providing a point of reference for my direction. It brightened as I traveled toward it, first starting off as a tiny speck, but growing in size and radiance as the wind rushed through my hair. In fact, the radiance of the light provided heat. What will become of you? I asked. I will escape and look for a way to liberate the rest of my family. Thank you for your help, I said graciously. We are allies now. The voice echoed before I was engulfed in light. The light placed me in a formless state, similar to the state I was in when traversing through the corridors in the insect's mind. There was no night sky, however, just a formless place of light. 3 familiar people formed in front of me, as if they had been formed from smoke. They were completely covered in a cloth robe, which seemed to suppress their chi. The affiliates? I asked, noticing the strange symbols written on their robes that covered everything on them, including their faces. Our mission aligns with your father's, the woman standing in front of the other two said. I recognized her voice. She was the one that I spoke to in one of the corridors. You are Sorochi's superiors? Indeed, she said. We cannot keep you in this state for very long, but there is a challenge. What is the problem? I asked. The insects will notice the absence of your consciousness. We must also remove your physical body from their ship, along with another body for the transfer. I had no physical body to relay concern, but what the robed woman told me was troubling. Transfer? The insects have come to know you. If you are able to get back into their collective consciousness, you will have to do it as someone else, she explained. I have been advised that I will need to keep my memories for what is to come. Your memories have been returned to you? She asked, her voice sounding slightly concerned. Indeed, I said. There was a long pause. I could not sense their vibrations, nor could I see their faces. But something was wrong. It was not the type of thing that could be sensed with elemental manipulation, but felt from within. Yes, it would be best for you to keep your memories, Guardian. So my memories did not deceive me. The king directly ordered that I be the spy for this mission. The mysterious woman came forward and raised her hand toward me. Chapter 20. The vibrations of wherever I had been transferred to were unsteady when I regained a physical form. I was not formless, But I was not completely physical either. It was a state somewhere in between. The vibrations around me constantly shifting, as if the place I was in struggled to maintain a solid state of being. I believe I was sitting. It felt as such. But the ever-present vibrational shifting and blurriness made it hard to orient myself and comprehend my environment. The vibrations of whatever state I was in made earth sensing impossible. Yet, I could still sense the chi of others in front of me. Arimonu, son of Adịmian Empire. A woman's voice called out. It was rasp and much different from the woman I was just speaking to. I nearly laughed. Surely I was in some sort of delusion or dream, trying to remember the events that led me here, but my mind was clouded and shifting, like this place. Answer to your name or this process will not go accordingly, she said in a serious tone. Impatience rushed from her chi after her words. I did not sense it innately or through actively trying, but rather it was sent to me deliberately by her. Like the others accompanying her chi was indeed present, but unreadable, not in a state of constant shifting, like everything else around me, but retracted and sealed somehow. I could only understand that there were other people in front of me, and nothing else. I squinted, trying to get a closer look at them, but it was as if a thick veil was draped over my head. I was only able to see their shapes and the faint, low yellow light that illuminated this place. It looked as if we were in a room, perhaps. It was hard to tell. Who are you? I asked, as an uneasy feeling started to befall me. Where am I? We are affiliates of King Ndubisi, your father. Yes. It was starting to come to me now. The events of the mission started flooding my mind. I am but a guardian that serves the king. Honorable and blessed he is. He is not my father, I explained. Perhaps she was of a culture within Adim that made no distinction between one's parents and one's rulers. Another rush of impatience came from the woman that spoke to me as she stayed silent for a long while. Arimonu, son of Adịmian Empire, she repeated. I nearly disagreed with her again, but I reluctantly obliged and answered to the name and title. Your mission was a failure. The ones you know as the insects have removed your disguise and have now come to know you. I shook at her words. Failure was not something I could accept. Rage burned within me. I wanted to shout. I should not have been selected for a mission so complex as this one. A capable soldier and manipulator I was, but I was no spy. As a way to provide you with a chance to right the wrongs of your mission, your chi has been separated from your physical body. It must undergo the necessary changes for what is to come next. What is to come next? I asked. My heart felt as if it were racing. I felt hot. I wanted to wipe the sweat that surely would have been on my brow, but I could not move. This state of being was peculiar indeed. It was as if I had no physical body despite feeling the sensations of one. We will attempt to transfer your chi into another body. I did not know what to say next. It sounded silly. Such things were only possible in fables. The most brilliant spiritual leaders and elemental masters alike taught that the chi has both physical and non-physical chambers. The only way for the chi to leave the body is through death. And when death occurs, the chi splits between these dualities. The physical chi travels to and stays in the realm of spirits, where it will be judged and further divided, while the non-physical chi reincarnates as someone else. Such a thing is not possible, I said. The woman sounded as if she chuckled with a closed mouth. I find the vibrational frequency in which you operate to be amusing. Listen well. The others that were with her seemed to fade away as I focused. The two of us now seemed as if we were standing across from each other. As you undergo the process of death, know this. The only certainty of Tambura is that it is in constant flow. There is no law to pattern oneself in accordance with it. You are of the ancient bloodline. Innately you know this. Believe this, and you will reach your full potential. Arimonu, son of Adịmian Empire. I felt pressure throughout my body when she reached toward me. Abruptly, I felt as if I had been submerged in water. The veil over my head still blurred my vision, my body still unable to abide by my commands. The vibrations around me became dense, like water, although they were still shifting and unconstant, unlike the typical wave and flow of water vibrations. I could not breathe. It was not as if I was holding my breath. I tried to, but I simply could not. As I rocked back and forth, attempting to swim upwards, the more I struggled, the deeper I seemed to sink in this strange water. It was thick, sinking me further into its depths as my chest felt like it was pumping, begging for oxygen. There was pressure throughout my entire body as my ears started ringing. The shapes and flashes of light within my veil started to darken. Just as I thought I would suffocate, a pair of hands grasped my underarms, lifting me toward the surface. My earth senses immediately revealed the blue scarf and dress the dark-skinned woman that was carrying me wore. Her garments contained the same symbols of the elderly healer from the south I had met in the insect's mind. "I've got you," she whispered. Chapter 21. The scorching rays of the three suns bore their heat on my bald head. The crowd gathered around the battle platform jeered at me. "Outcast! Demon!" The citizens of Nchizonga shouted at me as I stood across from my downed opponent. The sudden change of my environment and physical state was so disorienting, I nearly fell to my knees. How did I end up back in this cursed enclave? I took my hands off my knees. My chi was strong and my body capable. I looked around the arena. It had been many cycles since I had seen this place. I vowed never to return. Yet, here I was, in battle. My chief gave me the signal to slaughter my defeated opponent, much to the dismay and disapproval of the crowd. I knew this person, a warrior of a sister enclave. The chief was giving me the order to slaughter this warrior because of the wealth he would acquire from my victory. The chief himself, like everyone else in this land, despised me, yet he wanted me to kill for him. The crowd continued jeering as I stood, fully within my right to slaughter the warrior I had just defeated. It was then that my situation slowly started to make sense. This was no illusion or dream, but a memory. I was surely in the realm of spirits where I would be judged. This was my final battle as a warrior before I became a guardian. I immediately remembered how this battle unfolded. I chose not to kill for the chief this day, tired of all the times I had killed for him before. Doing so now would make no difference. I would still be an outcast. I backed away from my opponent and bowed, choosing to end the battle without slaughtering the warrior. The crowd still jeered at me for my decision. "Coward!" I heard throughout. The same feeling from all those cycles returned to me. I was resigned. No longer did I wish for their affection. This tournament marked the end of my servitude to the chief. He would not become a rich man off my broken back. As the crowd continued to jeer at me for not following the orders of my chief, and the master of ceremony declared the match over, I started ascending. I was not trying to make use of any flight technique. My body seemed to act on its own until I was engulfed in a bright red light as pressure squeezed my entire body. I was seated again. This time, my surroundings were clear and my body able to move. I was in the hosting quarters of a familiar house in Nchizonga, from what I could surmise. The horizontal designs woven into the rug which I sat atop and furniture in the room suggesting as such. It was my mind this time that seemed to be behind a veil. My thoughts were slow and clouded as a small group of servants came into the room and started setting dishes on the rug I was seated on. This place was familiar, but the memory was not coming to me. Not until he walked into the room and sat in front of me. The chief I served waddled in on his cane. His breathing labored. His stomach and legs jiggled in unison with the jingle of the heavy gold jewels around his neck and wrists as he sat. A sigh of relief coming from the depths of his lungs within his obese body. His mouth curved into a crooked grin, revealing the gold-encrusted jewels on his teeth. "I have been awaiting you, my dear Kondo," he said in his typical deep tone. His voice was like the dreadful hum of the insect's wings. "Do not call me that!" I snapped at him with a clenched jaw. He only just continued to smile at me. his beady eyes regarding me as if I was an emotional child. That fire still rages within you after all this while. My fists clenched and shook uncontrollably at the sight of him. My memories slowly started returning as my mind cleared. He was a dishonorable man, and I loathed him. Your beloved is here too, you know. The two of you can finally be together, he said nonchalantly, pouring himself wine, as if he was not the reason for her being here. Static charges started running through my body, to which he only chuckled. I know not exactly how much time has passed among the living, judging by your appearance. It has not been too long. His eyes changed after he took a sip from his glass and looked back at me. His eyes were characteristically beady and small, always appearing to look upon others with disdain, but they had now gone completely dark. For me, it has been an eternity. His teeth started to take the form of golden daggers as he leered at me, doubling in size and sharpness. "This is where you belong, demon!" I shouted, standing to my feet as the static charges running throughout my body intensified. You have much blood on your hands, my beloved included, which is why I put you here. My anger seemed to amuse him. So, it is true, after all. At the snap of his finger, all of his servants started to lament and cry, blood running down their cheeks. That cold morning, days after you defied me at the tournament and slayed me on that lonely road. It was in her honor, not for the souls I commanded you to take. Tears ran down my cheek as a fire burned in my chest. She was carrying my child, I cried out. She carried an abomination in her womb. His words nearly made me slash at him with a dagger of flame, but as I looked around the living quarters, I saw just how much the place transformed. It had been the quaint dwelling of the chief, but now, the food, which was placed on the table, had since rotted. Maggots and flies now feasted on the slimy remnants. The servants cried in low, painful tones, as fire consumed all of them individually. The chief himself sat atop a straw-high chair as if he were a king. His skin, peeled and blistered, with a yellow pus seeping through the cracks. His teeth, long and sharp, and the color of his eyes completely black. His body hardened in a carapace that was reminiscent of the crustaceans I encountered on my mission. You are not of Nchizonga. You are of a cursed and ancient bloodline, planted in the enclave by Ndubisi, the conqueror of Nakaru. His words brought me great confusion. Foolish man, I said. My mother was from Nchizonga. By custom, I had a right to the land and its freedoms. I am a citizen. But you all chose to outcast me because of your hatred. Lies, the chief said, his deep voice carrying over the flames that grew larger. Most of the dwelling had been destroyed by the fire, leaving rolling hills of ash around us. Disfigured people strung up on sticks could be heard screaming, being tortured by grotesque entities like the one in front of me talking with the chief's voice. King Ndubisi, your father, planted you in Nakaru after he conquered it to make you a strong warrior, so that you could become a capable guardian. But if you are here in the realm of spirits, it means you have failed. He started laughing, his voice deep and inhuman. It is only you who lies, I yelled, slowly approaching, my hatred for this man, this thing, rising with every passing moment. I may reign here as king in this place of torment and sorrow, but it is not because I was a liar, a man of greed, violence, and lust I was, but I did not lie, not to the same degree I killed. He jeered, a subtle reference to my beloved, the woman he ordered to be killed after I defied him. That disgraceful woman you knew to be your mother was nothing more than a traitor to her people, acting on the orders of the Adịmian ruler for fear of reprisal of the guardians. She is not your kin. Your true mother is of Adịmian blood. Whatever nonsense you speak ends here. I will slaughter you again if I must. Do your worst, dear Kondo. Another twisted figure walked in front of him, a long cutlass dragged by its bony legs as it limped toward me, the top half of its head missing. The thing was not human, but its chi was. In fact, its chi was recognizable. It was Masondo, the warrior I thought to be my friend. He was the one which lured me away the day my beloved was killed. I shook with rage, lunging at Masondo's disfigured, undead corpse with all my rage and sorrow, turning him into ash with one slash of a flaming dagger. I turned my attention to the chief, who only just sat in place, a crooked smile behind the sharp gold daggers in his mouth. I beheaded him, the same way I did that cold morning, after I discovered it was him that ordered the death of my beloved. His head rolled along the ash-covered hill we were atop, his body in place on the straw throne. But just as I did that morning in the physical realm, I still felt empty. I could slaughter him 1,000 more times, and still not receive respite because it did not bring my beloved back. Tears streamed down my eyes as I yelled and hacked away at the chief's body. I noticed a thick fog around me when there was nothing left of the chief to hack away at. The mist slowly crept up my arm when I stopped. It seemed to carry an inaudible whisper, making me flick it away frantically. It was an element of wind, yet it contained vibrations recognized by my earth senses. It had emotion. The very whisper of the strange thing invoked feelings of both anger and sorrow. I wrestled with the strange fog, desperately trying to keep it from further traveling up my arm, but the more I struggled, the stronger its grip on me. I started to run when I noticed it engulfing my legs. The mist's grip on me only intensified when I tried to use elemental manipulation to ward it off. The chi of so many others became apparent once the mist forced itself into my nose. You slaughtered all of us. I could hear the fog's infectious whisper in many different languages. I continued running, but the whispers became louder. The chi and physical forms of warriors and insects I had slain took shape. You slaughtered us. The whispers repeated. You belong here. I slashed at the figures with fire and electricity, but I could not get close enough to strike them and make the voices stop. It is Tambura's will that you stay here. Atone for your wrongdoings. It said as I frantically ran about the fog. There was no way out. The whisper rang in my ears, with it, memories of all those I had slain. A figure of a little boy appeared in front of me. I recognized the chi instantly. This was the very first person I had killed. I remembered his chi well. He had been just as scared as I was that day. For many cycles, his death haunted me, but sometime during my adolescence, it became easy. I had not noticed how natural killing had become for me until all the tormented souls within this mist demanded my atonement. Forgive me, I cried out. The whispers intensified. I am sorry. Truly, I did not know. I grabbed my ears, begging the fog to stop. So many different voices, all speaking as one. I was but a child. I had no choice. Tears streamed down my cheeks as the whisper brought me to my knees. It should not have been so easy. I was wrong. The voices were unbearable. I was wrong. I am sorry. I was wrong. I was indeed pleading with the voice, hoping it would stop, and began crying. Even now, with the souls of all that I had slain in front of me calling for atonement, I only felt sorrow because it was causing me pain. What if this fog could not infect my mind and senses? Would I still beg for forgiveness? I indeed belonged here. The whispers grew into screams. It should have been maddening, but I uncovered my ears. I would not run from their voices, from their cries. They were right. I had killed all of them, without remorse. I recalled my time in the insect's mind, how the ant and faceless variants slaughtered each other so easily. How foolish I had been to think I was any different, simply because I could command elements, and they could not. A sickening feeling befell me. General Emba was right. There was no difference between humans and the insects. We were both different iterations of Tambura itself. Come to me. A distinct voice called out to me. It did not yell like the others, talking in a soft tone. Yet I heard it clearly. My ears perked, listening again. Come to me. I stood immediately once, recognizing the voice to be that of my beloved. The location of the voice seemed far away at first, but became closer the more I focused. The destination was inside me. I looked around at the mist. So many souls made to be restless by my hand. Come to me. My beloved's voice repeated. I did not feel as if I should leave this place. I caused pain to these souls, and put them in such a place they should torment me. It was just. Come to me. The voice continued to call out. I recalled the words of the commander of the mission's affiliates. The only certainty of Tambura is that it is in constant flow. There is no law to pattern oneself in accordance with it. If what she said is true, then Tambura did not demand that I stay here despite my wrongdoings. I was choosing to stay here as a result of my own guilt. I could not know for sure, but I think I could leave if I followed the voice of my beloved. I focused in on where the voice came, attaching myself to its heavy vibration, and closed my eyes, drifting to it. I soon became weightless and formless as I drifted toward the vibration of my beloved, until her chi was right beside me. The morning air was crisp as the sweet smell of grass entered my nose. I opened my eyes to see my beloved across from me in the bed, smiling. The sun always seemed to add a brown glow to her skin. I smiled as tears immediately ran down my face. I'm sorry, I said, closing my eyes. For what? She smiled, caressing my hand in her palms. I should have known. I could have saved you. She said nothing, and only just held my hand for a long while, until I opened my eyes to look at her again. I am at peace, my love, she said plainly. Your time in the physical world has yet to end. There is much life ahead of you. She smiled again, to which I held her tight. I cannot leave you. Not again, I said firmly, gripping her skin in between my fingers. You must, she whispered, kissing my cheek. Farewell, my beloved, was the last thing I heard my beloved say before I started drifting. I tried to fight it, but I could not. I floated along with my eyes closed, trying to cling on to the fleeting vibration of my beloved. Our interaction was too brief. I wanted more time with her. I wanted to tell her about everything that had happened since her untimely death, about the revenge I carried out on the man that planned her death. I wanted to tell her about the Guardians, about my time in both Adim and Messina, about the mission, but she was gone. I was formless again, reluctantly drifting towards some other state of existence. Chapter 22. The waters that carried me to shore receded back toward the sea. I felt my body as I lay on the sand, disoriented from my journey. I scanned my surroundings once I collected myself, immediately sensing the sky. It carried a strange vibration I did not recognize, but it did not breathe in the same manner in which it did when I was in the insect's mind. Given all that was occurring, I could not know for sure if I was indeed free from the grasp of the insects, but it felt as if I had not been here before. I assumed I was still in the realm of spirits, but wherever I was, it was certainly not the insect's homeland. The beach I washed up on had a familiar color of copper sand and murky water. The trees in the forest ahead of me were not overgrown, looking like the palm trees of Adim, and contained no fungus. There was a small hut atop the shoreline that contained the vibrations of a small group. I struggled to lift myself from the sand. My body felt as if it was anchored down by boulders, and my breathing became shallow, trying to find the strength to lift myself. I staggered to the compound of the hut, confused as to my lack of energy. A woman and a guardian came out of the hut to greet me when I approached the entrance. I recognized the symbols on the scarf the woman wore. She was from one of the southern healer clans, the very same tribe as the old man I came across in the insect's mind. I did not recognize the guardian. He was bald and had a visually pleasing ear piercing, made of gold and feathers. "You made it." The healer smiled. The guardian regarded me with a tense concern and said nothing. "Please come in. The process is almost complete," she said to me, gesturing for me to follow. I followed her into the hut to see an elderly man, an elderly woman, and a young woman. The elderly man watched me with uneasy and fearful eyes as I stumbled to my seat. Anger and fear spilled from the chi of the elderly woman that accompanied him. I was nearly startled into feeling like my normal self when sensing who I assumed to be their daughter. I knew her, or rather, I had recognized her. Her vibrations were distant, distraught. This was the woman I had briefly talked to while in the insect's mind, right before I was made to battle my way out of the cave. Our whole lives have been at the mercy of the guardians. The old man sighed deeply as he spoke Ichri, seated with whom I assumed to be his wife and child. And even now, after the death of me and my wife, the guardians still want from us. I struggled to meet the man's gaze. My vision became more blurry with every passing moment. I desire for nothing more than to revisit the part of my chi that has since split in the spiritual realm, and receives great pleasure in tormenting the souls of guardians lost in that realm. The man's voice shook with a deep anger. I could now sense the pure disdain he had for me. "However, I come to you reluctantly, hoping you complete the spiritual journey you have been made to go on." I looked at him. Anger and disdain certainly housed in his chi, but there was also fear. The same fear that both his wife and child had. "My dear daughter, sweet and peaceful she is, has been slighted by Tambura the Divine." I turned my attention to his daughter. Her head was down as she stared solemnly into her palms. The pain the guardians caused her during her life was too great. She had been violated countless times, and then later sold into slavery after our deaths, having nearly taken her own life while with her captives. Her vengeful soul sought atonement in blood. As a result of having taken life in the physical realm as a vengeful spirit, she has cursed herself to perpetual torment until her next physical life cycle ends. By now my ears started ringing, but I tried my best to listen. "If her soul stays here while you use her physical body to accomplish your mission, you will allow her a second chance at life, a chance to heal from all the torment brought on by your father's soldiers. Even now, having experienced the realm of spirits myself, it seemed surreal, as if it were just a mere dream. She is no murderer," her mother began to plead. "She is a soft-hearted and sweet girl that can speak with animals. She is no warrior or soldier. Her mind had been convoluted. I was not there to help her." Her mother began to weep. It did seem rather unbelievable. I had talked to their daughter briefly during our time in the insect's mind. I knew she had never killed prior to that point. I could not allow her soul to suffer torment, not after what she had been made to go through in her life. "I will help your daughter," I said, my voice barely able to talk over a whisper as I nearly fell on the floor. "We must begin now," the healer said. "May Tambura favor you." The mother said, relief in the chi of both her and her husband. The young woman said nothing, and only just patted my shoulder, hope radiating from her. The healer, the girl's parents, and the guardian led us to the back of the hut, where there was a stream behind some bushes. "Lay on your back," the healer instructed once I walked in. I had become incredibly fatigued and welcomed the thought of laying on my back and resting. The guardian helped the girl do the same. I felt a downward pull as soon as I laid back, followed by flashing blue light, and the weightlessness that accompanied the feeling of being without a physical form. The gentle wave vibrations of the water slowly started to feel more like rushing wind as I floated in the stream, formless. Slowly, I started becoming heavier, gaining more mass as bones and muscles started to form and water moistened my skin. I was fully formed when I reached the end of the stream, getting out of the shallow water without being wet, only a single white cloth covering my legs. The girl's mother met me on the path away from the stream, smiling at me warmly as she ran her fingers through my hair. I stumbled over my feet, feeling as if I was intoxicated, being led down another path by the old woman until we reached another body of water. This one was deeper than the previous stream and more violent. I was launched into its current once the girl's mother let me go. This time, I struggled to breathe and fought against the current to get my head above the water. But I would eventually succumb to the powerful waves, feeling the water enter my mouth and lungs. Suddenly, everything was black. For a brief moment, I thought I was in the dark corridor again in the insect's mind. But this place was different. The ground felt different. It was unlike the grainy floor within the dark corridor, solid, yet non-material. In fact, there was no floor at all. If I really focused my senses, they relayed to me that the floor was just an illusion. There was nothing beneath me. There were no confines. This place seemed infinite, yet I felt I was in a room of sorts. I did not have a physical body, yet I did not traverse through stars as I did when in the mind of the insects. I did not move, just fixed in a seemingly endless dark space. What is this place? I thought. An outline of a giant man illuminated the dark, dwarfing me in an instant. I stared at the giant outline, taking in its silhouette. It wore guardian armor. Arimonu. The giant figure's powerful voice boomed. Where am I? I asked. When the spirit is separated from the body, it must undergo the necessary changes for what is to come next. I considered the giant's words. Have I died? You are in the process of dying, but your time in the physical realm has not ended. The mysterious figure said, despite its voice so booming, it was as if it was whispering directly into my ear. What made it all the more strange was that it was my own voice that I heard in my ear. What are you? I called out to it. There was a brief silence. What you seek in a master, the Chi already knows, it said. Slowly, its massive arm moved toward me and it extended its index finger. Was this figure me? If so, it was just as the spiritual leaders taught. There is a part of one's chi that is in a constant state of non-existence. This part of a person's chi is their higher self, and often contains unknown knowledge. Such things were common knowledge among those that studied it. But to actually witness it was a sight to behold. Can the mission succeed? I asked it, knowing it already knew the answer. You will successfully meet the parameters of your mission, but things will change. How so? I asked myself. You will be the one to put an end to the royal Adịmian lineage. There will be no more Adịmian kings or queens. It said before a bright yellow light shone from its finger. Chapter 23. I awoke to the hum of a ship's engine. The yellow light I had just experienced faded quickly. With it, many different voices, many different memories, all of it fleeting. There shall be no more Adịmian kings, the only constant in my head. That and a woman's name, Chimamanda. The words in my head were not my own, likely coming from a deity I had met in that realm, perhaps. It all seemed to happen so long ago and was a blur. I sensed my surroundings, aside from the hum of the engines. There was no pulse coming from within the ship, nor was there the sound of giant insect wings. I shot up from where I laid, noticing the chi of someone seated near me, but quickly yielded to the unbearable pain in my stomach. It soon spread throughout my entire body, making me lay on my back and close my eyes as I struggled to breathe. I could not make use of my earth manipulation to internally sense what was causing my ailment. It wasn't as if I had mysteriously forgotten how to command the earth. My body was different, changed completely. Arimonu, son of Ndubisi, an unknown voice said. I turned my head to see a fully robed person, their face fully covered with a chi that was unsensible past an initial distinction. You have successfully escaped death. The person continued. And although your memories, your spirit, and your chi intact, your body has changed. Just as I suspected, I felt my face, my hair was long, my skin smooth, my bones were smaller, I was younger, I had breasts, my body was not my own, my heart started racing, and the immense pain from earlier returned, radiating throughout my body into my blood. Because this is not your true form. Your new body has developed a sickness that will kill you if you occupy it for more than 4 cycles. It is much weaker and sickly than your old form. But it matters not. The strange robed person said. I tried to ignore the unnatural pain that emanated deeper than my bones, as if it came from my blood itself. But I could not. Even in my true body, I did not have the knowledge to command such ailments away. The chi in this body was weak. I held my stomach, retching with the utmost pain, no vomit coming from me, only pain radiating from inside. Something was certainly wrong with me. I did not need my abilities to feel it. The pain eventually subsided once I calmed myself, and I was able to sit up again. While your current form is only temporary, the latent memories housed in your body will eventually resurface once you become accustomed to your new form. Understand that these memories belong to the real Chimamanda, who is still in the realm of spirits with one of our affiliates. The robed person explained, waiting for another one of my painful episodes to subside before continuing. The insects must not know that you are no longer with them. I followed the pointed finger of the affiliate, seeing my true body laying still behind me. It had been recovered somehow. It was strange looking at myself from the outside. I looked like a slumbering animal, my body much broader than the current form I was occupying. How were you able to recover my body from that ship? I asked. The insects do not know of advanced stealth techniques a master wind manipulator can make use of. His words brought a slight annoyance. It was as I had been speculating all along. I was not a spy that could employ such techniques. Why was I selected for such a mission over guardians that were much more skilled than me? Can I still make use of my abilities? I asked. Not in the manner in which you could before, but in the insect's consciousness, your mind will be free. We will return you to your true body once your mission is complete. It will be safe in our care. What will become of Chimamanda? I asked, still feeling my face and hair. Peaceful negotiations with her ancestors have been made in the realm of spirits. Our affiliate will remain by her side, and you will occupy her body for the remainder of the mission. And when we put you back into your true body, she will live, free from the sickness your chi has given her. I tried to remember the experience of being transferred into another body, but it was a blur now. All I could remember was the name of the young woman whose body I now occupied, passing through 2 rivers, and the voice which stated there shall be no more Adịmian kings or queens. What about the mission? I asked, eager to complete my mission successfully, without incident this time. Being here, especially in a body so fragile, made me realize I had failed. I had to return. I had to try again. You will go back in due time, but we must report. To whom? I asked the affiliate. Your father. My legs trembled under my own weight, despite this body being much smaller. I had been formless for so long. I was not used to walking in the physical world. In the mind of the insects, and from what I could remember from the chi transfer, I was weightless most of the time, and my mind was able to will myself to do anything. Unlike now, where I seemed to be at the mercy of nature. The robed person led me into a meeting quarters within the ship. More fully robed people with their strange chi-blocking garments were seated in the center of the room on a rug, including a woman. I could not sense her fully, but she was familiar to me. Their leader, I thought. There were 2 others seated amongst the affiliates that immediately caught my attention, a commander and a healer from the south. The pair were not only distinct from the affiliates in appearance, but also in their chi. where all the robed, masked individuals housed chi that was present but unreadable. These two had a chi that were quite distinct, particularly the Guardian. As the ability which enables me to comprehend the earth slowly returned to this form, I was taken back to sense such fear from a commander of soldiers. I observed him closely. This was the very same commander that was the second in command of the regiment that initiated my mission. He now shook with much fear and uncertainty, as if he was heading into battle for the first time. I was drawn to the healer. I don't entirely know why. She was neither a warrior nor guardian. Why was she amongst us? The guardian noticed me entering the room. He said nothing, but his eyes carried surprise. A strange dark fog started to leak from his vibrations. Guilt, I thought. Comprehension of earth slowly returning to me. I paused and studied his face. Like an untamed fire in the forest, memories that were not my own started to flood my mind. Horrific memories of the commander and other guardians of his regiment, doing horrible things to me, to this body I was occupying, against my will. "Sit, son of Ndubisi," the robed woman in the center of the rug said, taking my attention away from such unspeakable acts. She retrieved a small njiko, and within an instant, we found ourselves in an airy chamber. "I call upon Ndubisi, king of the Adịmians," the woman said. There was nothing for a long while. We all sat there silent, waiting. Shortly, clouds started to form in the center of where we sat. From the clouds emerged a man, grand in stature, yielding the horned crown and many gold jewels. He sat atop a long straw stool. "I trust that you have handled the situation," the king said to the robed woman, his voice heavy and commanding. "Indeed, it is done," she said, pointing toward me. The king turned his attention toward me, sitting further forward in his chair. "Well done," he smiled. "The healer and the commander helped with this?" "Indeed," she said. "Let me speak with them." She then pointed to them, and the king refocused his attention. It seemed as if he did not have control over who he was able to see. "Commander Eze," the king said. "My king." The guardian acknowledged, pinning his right fist to his heart and bowing. "How did you come to be in the presence of my affiliates?" After Echo fell to the insects, Agent Kwame informed me of the issue this mission was facing. The healer was an ally I made during the invasion. She aided in keeping Agent Arimonu's chi intact when it was being transferred. "Well done, Commander. We need leaders like you. You will be made into a general when you return home." The Guardian's chi radiated with pride as he saluted and prostrated to King Ndubisi. "Your survival brings honor to your fallen comrades," the king said. His words made me remember the general I came across in the insect's mind and how strong the insect's influence over him was. The king went on to give commemoration to the healer that accompanied Commander Eze, the one which kept my chi intact during the transfer. I tried to recall the entire process, but the only thing I could remember was her arms underneath my own, saying, "I've got you," as she lifted me upwards. It was strange knowing I had undergone something many thought to be impossible, and having hardly any recollection of it. The healer seemed meek, unassuming with kind eyes. She was not a soldier, yet the commander trusted her for such a task, and was apparently correct in doing so. "I will now speak to Agent Arimonu," the king ordered, to which the robed woman pointed to me. His eyes brightened at the sight of me. I was not sure how to feel. The mission had not gone as planned, and I was now unsure of how to address him. Was I now to call him father? Was he aware that I knew I was his son? "My king," I said, pinning my right fist to my chest and bowing. "My child," he said, smiling. I looked up at him, confusion weighing my chi down. "It is all right. I am sure, during the process you have just undergone between traversing the insect's mind and nearly dying, you have uncovered who you truly are." I said nothing, and only just stared at the king, my father. What could be said? He only just smiled. You have not failed, my child. The mission still continues. In fact, the mission is at its most critical point. How so, father? I asked nervously, hoping I had not offended him. We now know the insects can control our minds, and they wish to harness our elemental manipulation abilities. I will now have my affiliate see into your mind and relay the findings you made while with the insects. One of the affiliates in the room came to me and placed their palm on my forehead. It was just a quick flash, but when they finished, it felt as if I had just experienced the battles I fought against the insects again. They walked over to their leader and transferred the light into the small Njiko, which the leader illuminated blue with a manipulation technique that was unknown to me. The king's eyes illuminated a similar blue color shortly after. Interesting indeed, he said with a distant gaze, his eyes still glowing, his hand stroking his smooth chin. They wish to learn of our basic instincts, what drives our will to survive. His words reminded me of the very first battle I fought while with them, and the irony of occupying this body, a person who did not yield the spirit of a warrior. The king released a concerned-sounding grumble after he had been silent for some time, his eyes still glowing. He stroked his chin slower once his eyes stopped glowing, as if contemplating. They cannot manipulate the elements. Not yet. You will make it such that they never will. He stated after refocusing his gaze toward me. His orders seemed to ring in my ears, passing into my head and sunk into my stomach, weighing me down heavily. I had never previously had such a crucial responsibility. I was unsure of whether I was even capable of accomplishing such a thing, especially against the likes of the insects. They are raising an army of human soldiers that are completely under their control. Even now, as their horde infects Eastern Adam, they are melding human consciousness into their collective. The new parameters of your mission are to uncover how the insects are able to have such control over our minds and learn the technique and mimic it, while ensuring they do not uncover how to command the elements. You are to fool the insects into thinking you are an indoctrinated soldier within their ranks. When you return to Adim under their command, you will reverse the indoctrination of all the human soldiers under their control, after which you will go back into your true body. I stood deathly still, desperately wishing for the situation to return to how it was at the very start of the mission. The orders were simple: infiltrate, deceive, collect, return. Although I was unaware of exactly what I was getting into, the orders were simple. Now it was too real. The stakes were too high, and I alone was responsible for the mission's success. Why? I wanted to ask. These parameters were far more difficult. How was I to learn to do these techniques, especially now that I was in a much weaker and sickly body? Yes, my king, I said quickly while saluting, doubt emanating from my chi. The king paused for a long while and just stared at me. It's strange, he began, still assessing me. You do not look anything like your true self, and I am too far away to make use of my sensing abilities. Yet, in your eye, your true chi radiates. I have no doubts that you may have many questions for me. The king smiled, as if sensing my inner turmoil. I will answer everything once you return home. There is much for you to learn. I stood in front of him, silent, yet again. Intuition tells me you may already know the answer to these questions. What one seeks in a master, the chi already knows. His words invoked a vision of a massive shadowy figure in a dark, empty space. It was only just a flash, but it was enough to put strain on my chi. I felt weak in the knees. I will be going now, but we will talk again. And just as suddenly as King Ndubisi appeared before us, he vanished. The furnishings of the quarters became visible again.